Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Control video walkthrough. This is going to be played on the PC, as you can see, but I have tailored my strategy so that it will work on any version of the game that you might be able to get your hands on. And this walkthrough is going to be commentated by, of course, yours truly. If you do not like a commentated version of your walkthroughs when you watch to get guidance or to see strategies to get through an awkward encounter, then I will do a version of this video that has no commentary on it, and you will see the link to that usually either in the comments or the description. At the very beginning of these videos I like to say this purely because there's always that dude, and if I can save him the frustration of getting frustrated with me talking, we can all, live a better life, hopefully.
The janitor is a friendly face.
But this is Control. My walkthrough is not on any higher difficulties, guys, because the game doesn't have them. The game is bizarrely inspired in a lot of ways by FromSoft's lineage of games at this moment, the Soul series, and there's going to be a couple of comparisons to those, and we're going to be talking about that quite a lot in the flow of these videos. This walkthrough is going to cover only the main missions. This game has a lot of optional stuff that you can busy yourself with. It is a pseudo-open world, and you can go in many directions, even though some of them are slightly more locked than other ones. But at the very beginning here, we're going into the director's office, we're playing as Jesse, and we're now going to be getting our hands on the firearm that's going to be guiding us through the rest of the game. This walkthrough is going to be a no-health upgrade walkthrough, so I'm going to beat the whole game with the base HP that you see me using right now. And I'm doing that so hopefully I can make the game a bit more of a challenge, because when games don't have conventional difficulties, they usually fluctuate between being a little bit too easy and then occasionally being a little bit too hard. And I think the balance in the gameplay in this particular game is an interesting topic to debate, and we're going to talk a lot about that because Remedy has a rich history of interesting difficulty for sometimes the wrong reasons, but not the reasons you might be expecting. But this is your first encounter with the enemies. I am not warmed up with this game at all at this moment in the recording, guys, so my aim is not the best. You'll have to bear with me. There are a couple of things that you need to know about the aim which are really important. When you aim with the ADS button, you will become more accurate with your gun, but you will move slower. If you aim with hipfire, you will be able to move at your quickest and be very evasive, but your accuracy will obviously plummet because of this. But those two things are going to really help you out when it comes to being in a bit of a pinch. And then there's just the oddity that happens in this game that I don't really understand, and I think is a bit of a bug, which is there are times when you aim your gun at an enemy and they don't take damage. And there are a lot of reasons for this, that it can happen. It could be collision, it could be detection, it could be a whole host of different variables. But fundamentally, there are times when you're going to miss out on getting damage that you should have got. And I don't know if Remedy are going to be able to address this. I don't know if you've noticed it, but you will see it in this walkthrough, and it can be difficult to see what's really going on unless you slow it down. And if you want to slow it down, you can do so on YouTube because they have the tools to do that, which is pretty awesome. But you can see that the reticle goes red, the reticle is on the enemy, the reticle gives you an X for a hit marker, and then they take no damage. And when you're using a shotgun at point blank range, you kind of need them to take damage. It's one of those strange things. So my first real tip for new players taking on Control, do not trust the gun. And I know that it's not the kind of tip I want to give you, because you should trust your weapons. Your weapons should be the thing that keeps you alive. However, in this game, once we get launch, it's going to turn Control into launch the game, because it's so much more powerful than the handgun will ever be, regardless of how much you invest in it. And you can invest a lot in the handgun, but because of the nature of my walkthrough, where I'm only doing the main missions, and I'm going to be going through it quite promptly, I'm not going to have the chance nor the RNG to get the items that make the gun as good as it can be. Because the gun can be very good, guys. It just takes a little work. But at this moment in time, Jessie does not have access to her dodge, so this is the moment where you are going to trade with the most damage and potentially take the most damage if you're not careful, because you have no way or no means of avoiding being hurt outside of just, you know, strafing and being wiggly and all of those classic maneuvers from old school first-person shooters. But the moment you get the dash, the game gets a lot easier when it comes to being able to see what's about to hit you and being able to avoid that from happening. On PC, you would think I would have an incredible advantage with the aim, but you really don't in this game because of the mentioning of the issues that I've had with the gun. Launch itself is an ability that we're going to be getting very soon, where the game aims for you. And even if you play on console, the game's going to aim for you, so you don't have to have the best aim. So if anybody's having problems with the game's aiming system or with the gun not being as good as they'd like it to be, launch is going to pretty much pick up that slack for you. There are a couple of pitfalls in relying on that ability. The first one is sometimes it will not pick up the correct piece of geometry that you want it to pick up, and it can leave you hanging for a couple seconds that can lead to bad things. And additionally, it can miss because it's projectile. I believe the gun is hit scan, even though it wouldn't surprise me if it wasn't, because I've missed some shots I should have never missed. I'll be very careful here as well, guys. If you go towards the inverted pyramid, you're going to trigger a unique enemy. And he has a submachine gun, which is this fellow here. He does a lot of damage and he takes a lot of damage. The things to bear in mind in Control, the number above the enemy is meant to correlate to their level. However, later on in the game, you go from fighting level 6 enemies to level 30 enemies, and the level 30 enemies die just as fast. So, I don't know if that number is just to give you the illusion of progression and to show you that you're moving through the game, or if it has any kind of gameplay implications, because it's very difficult to notice. But what you will notice is whenever you come up against an enemy that has a name, he will be a unique enemy, he'll be tanky as all hell, and he will drop unique stuff. So the best mods for your weapons and your personal abilities will come from killing those unique people, or potentially side quests, or maybe even that crazy lucky drop. Once again though folks, if you came to this walkthrough to see the story, to understand the cutscenes, to get into the fiction and the narrative of Remedy's new game, you're not going to get that in my walkthrough. My walkthrough is going to be trimming all of those out so that for the people who need help with the gameplay, they don't have to watch through all the things they've already watched themselves. And I know to some people this might sound crazy and not the thing that they want, but there are plenty of other places on YouTube that you can pick up information for Control and watch playthroughs. Mine is strictly a walkthrough. But go back and speak to Emily. We're now going to be in the boardroom, and she's going to be giving us some of our first mission objectives. This is going to be introducing you to some of the systems that exist within Control. The first of which is these loot boxes, which are literally going to give you loot, which is very nice. They are loot boxes that aren't absolute assholes and demand money. Maybe they do later on, I don't know what the plan is with those, but usually if you go into a room, guys, you will notice that there is a box somewhere with a green light on it, and it denounces that when you open it, you're going to get something. There are two categories of things you seem to get from these boxes. The first of those is mods that you can immediately attach to your gear. The second is components to make the mods in the system that you can do via the control points. A really, really nice piece of visual language that Control uses is if you're ever wondering where to go, there is almost always a green light next to the door which will lead to where you generally need to be, and if that isn't enough to get you where you need to be, there are these wonderful signposts everywhere that are written around the building that work almost like a pseudo map. It is really, really good design, and it helps just the architecture of the building show you where you need to be, where you're going, and where you don't want to be, really. And if that's not enough for you, you can use the map as well. You'll see me flit it up every so often just to make sure I'm on the right direction. Here's a couple of the standard hiss enemies that we're taking on. Throughout this walkthrough, guys, I'm not going to be able to tell you the names of the hiss because I don't know them. I know the archetypes, I know what they do, I generally know the best thing to do to them, but fundamentally, I don't know that much about this game. I just played it, I found the strategies that worked the best for me, and then I emulated them in a second run so that I could share this walkthrough with you. What I do know, though, is there are only a few of them that are going to be a big problem to you. As far as danger goes in this game, danger is only ever really present if you do the wrong things. And there's a lot of skill involved in this game as well at times, which is nice, so you can use your own abilities and your own ability with Jesse to circumvent a cheap death. That doesn't mean that cheap deaths won't find you, because this game has an interesting relationship with gravity. It has a levitating mechanic that's not my favourite, and just general moments where you take nuclear damage in this game. If you get close to people in this game, they do so much damage. There are moments where you, like the missiles, there's an enemy that fires missiles, and if that missile hits you correctly, it is almost always 99% of damage to you. I've never been killed by a missile in one shot, but I would imagine if it hits you correctly, it will. And you just have to be aware of it. The good news is, that particular enemy is going to become your greatest damage dealer later on, because you're going to get a skill that enables you to catch the rockets. Catching the rockets is probably the best move in the game, in my opinion. And I have to preface that by saying, I haven't got the other moves. I ended up accidentally stumbling upon the shield, where you get the rocks around you, but the other moves that you can get in the game, I did not have any practice with them, because they were tied to side missions that I did not do when I was recording this. Ooh, and that's a new mechanic as well. So, you'll notice that this guy has this red aura around him. This red aura denounces a shield. The shield is also displayed in a white bar above the HP of the enemies. You have to take away the shield before you can do damage. It's pretty simple, pretty basic stuff. And we're also getting our first example here of Control's aesthetic. There are going to be moments where the colour scheme of the building is going to go very, very unusual, and I would say get used to this because it's going to happen a lot. And it has to be said, as much as it is an interesting and strange and it works with the aesthetic of the game and the story, it can be difficult to see your target sometimes, and it can be awkward to have the right amount of visibility that you would have had if it was normal. That being said, I never had enough problem where it got in the way. I wish I could say the same with Gears of War 5, but that simply is not the case. The teammates in Gears of War 5 have a piece of programming that literally says, every time you're about to get a good shot on a locust, we're going to stand in front of you. And I will never understand why that happens, but it really does. But cleanse the control point. Feel free to use the countermeasures or put on some mods. Whatever it is that you want to do, make sure you do it before you proceed onwards. I will be trimming a lot of those out. I'm only going to keep a couple of them in to give you some reference of what I'm using. But fundamentally, this is going to be completely Spartan, minimalistic, and it's going to be A to B, how to beat the game. So let's talk about mods, shall we? Because there's a lot of them. So the mods seem to be randomly generated. You'll get a mod that's either level 1 to 5, and it will have a varying degree of quality of what it does. The mods do a whole host of different functions, all the way from giving you more HP, to healing you faster when you pick up the stuff, to giving you more energy, to recovering your energy faster, to making your moves more damaging, to making your guns more damaging. The fundamental principle that I'm going to be following when it comes to my playstyle is, on my weapon, I will always put more damage. If I can do raw damage and get lucky with the drops, I'll do that. If I can't, I will usually go with low HP damage, because I'm going to spend a decent amount of time on this game with pretty low HP. Because there are certain firefights where if you take damage immediately, you have to commit to fighting back because of the way the regeneration works in this game, which I'm going to talk to about in a moment. Secondly, on my mods, I will not be using anything that will augment my HP or augment my life regeneration. The point of this run is for me to challenge myself by having base HP to make the game a bit more interesting. And it gives you a flexibility blanket, like a safety blanket, for if you want to use this and you're having trouble. That way, if you upgrade your HP, if you use HP mods, you will be able to take more hits than I do, so if you struggle with replicating any of the strategies, which I'm almost certain that you won't, you can do that. And then here is the tutorial for the strongest move in the game, known as Launch. And it's a little uncooperative. I don't know if you saw that just then, but you know, it's interesting. If anybody played Bioshock, there was a move in Bioshock called telekinesis. It was a move that a lot of people used to grab items from afar, but they slept on its damage. If you don't know, guys, in Bioshock, if you throw a body at an enemy, it's an instant kill for most of the game. We're talking like 80% of that game, it will kill enemies in one hit. It is preposterously strong. Even on the hardest difficulty, it is still incredibly viable all the way up to like midway through a Festus. It is really strong, and the enemies that it doesn't kill in one hit are usually people like Big Daddies. Afterwards, you might have to kill them twice, hit them twice with a body to kill them. But this is the thing with it. When you throw the body at somebody, it hits them, and if it doesn't kill them, you pick the body back up and throw it at them again. You have an endless supply of death-dealing tools because of the way that telekinesis works. It's one of the most powerful setups in that game, but because that game has so many powerful setups, it's easy to not see it and not use it. In this game, launch is the exact same thing. Launch in this game is generally a one-hit kill on most things once you start upgrading it, and if the thing that you hit doesn't die from it, they get stunned so long from the impact that the next thing you throw at them will kill them. And the rest of the game is going to be me using this ability, and you want to use it too. And if you look at the top of the screen, there is a white bar. That white bar governs how many times you can use your special abilities in the game, and then you have to wait for it to regenerate. There are 2 mods that I would recommend. The first one is a mod that will give you faster regeneration on your energy. The second mod is a mod that will give you more energy in general. On the upgrade path for this game, I'm going to upgrade 2 things. I'm going to upgrade launch damage all the way to max, and I'm going to upgrade energy so that I can use launch more. The only other things I will be upgrading will be the ability to throw back rockets, and I think that will be it. But right now, this is a brief example of me going in and equipping the mods that I've just picked up. You won't see me doing that too much, but it doesn't mean I'm not doing it. One of the most important things I can say to a new viewer, or maybe to somebody that perhaps never realised because you don't watch walkthroughs on any kind of serious business, you just like to chill and relax. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening, guys. There's a lot of editing in this video. I do not play games from start to finish and never die. You're not going to see me die in this, but I do die a lot. Everyone dies a lot, guys. It's how you learn. But secondly, there's a lot of things you can do in this game to make your life easier. Just because you don't see me doing them doesn't mean they're not happening. The first of those is the board countermeasures. You'll probably see me go into those a couple times, but I'm not going to linger in that menu because it makes more editing for me and it makes the run less streamlined. But to kind of wrap it up for you, the board countermeasures are challenges that you can do. And when you do them, you will be rewarded with a random mod for your weapon. There's a fight in this room, and it's optional, but I always do it because for some reason I find myself doing it. You can also throw CRTs at people, which is pretty funny. But as I was saying, they are challenges that you can do to get yourself mods, and there's something that can constantly be ticking forward. The problem that I have with them is I don't know the name of the hiss, and the challenges are anchored on you knowing which enemy is which. So what will happen is, it will give you an area, it will give you a gun type to use, and it will give you an enemy to kill. And if you do it, you'll get your reward. So you can carry, I think, a maximum of 3 of these abilities at all times. And the best way to play Control is to constantly have 3 challenges always running, so you're always getting new things. My issue is, A, I don't know which hiss is which, so I pick the ones you never fight and never complete them, and B, I tend to forget to do it, so when I go to check the challenges, they're for areas I've already been through and I'm never going back to. So, a piece of advice, learning from 2 playthroughs of this game, try to get on board with the naming structure of the game and the area and location names, and then use the countermeasures to best of your ability. They will help, they're pretty cool. And then the second thing that you're not going to see me do too much, but I'm obviously going to be doing it, is with the mods. So the mods take a little bit of management, because you will fill up on them and not be able to pick them up, and then you'll have to break them down. And I haven't found a good way of breaking down the mods where you can select a bunch of them and break them all down. I don't know if Remedy forgot to do that, or if it's something that I've not figured out, but you have to break them down individually by holding a button, and it takes forever because you have to break down 20 plus mods sometimes. And it gives you a resource that you can use to spend, which is pretty useful if you're going to be spending it, because there is also the option to buy mods and to buy upgrades. Which, in all honesty, guys, I don't really know how you should spend your money. I've bought a couple of the mods, the randomly generated ones. They take a upgrade material and they take money as well, and I've never got anything good, but I think that's just because my luck is terrible, so maybe you'll get more fortunate than I am and get a really good one. Maybe you have way more money because you're doing all the side quests, so you can just spend away. But from what I've seen, you don't have to buy them, you really don't. It's kind of up to you. And now we have the first boss, which is Tomasi. So, Tomasi is an enemy type that's going to be an issue throughout the full game, because they're an enemy type that has an auto-evade. How this enemy works is if you stun him with your gun, or if he dodges away from your bullets, if you throw launch at him then, he will not dodge it. If you raw throw launch, he'll dodge it. Every so often, he won't dodge it. And it's kind of this hit and miss situation. When you get the pierce later on, if you hit him with the pierce, he always dodges afterwards, and then you can throw something at him and he never dodges it. But fundamentally, wait for him to dodge, guys, then once he's dodged, throw the launched item at him and he will never dodge it. He can't. It's part of his scripting. See, just then, not doing it right. So learn from my mistakes in this particular battle, and of course there's going to be a couple of ads in this, but they're not a problem because they die really quickly. But if you watch him, see how the second one hit him just then? The second one hit him because he can't dodge repeatedly, he has a cooldown. And that's all you do. You wait for his cooldown, and then you hit him. That move he's doing right there with the debris, if he hits you with that, it does ridiculous damage. It's really damaging, you want to be very careful. Here are a couple of his buddies, feel free to take them out. And don't worry about this enemy if you have a tough time the first time. This is an enemy you're going to fight a lot. You're going to learn how to fight him much more conveniently than you do in this room. But this is actually a really simple encounter if you're intelligent about it, but you can die really fast here and you don't have a dodge. So I've seen a lot of people die here. I died here, you know. It happens. I went on GameFAQs and a bunch of people on GameFAQs are saying they like the game but they wish it had an easy mode. So it just goes to show that some people are having a tough time with this game, and it's understandable because you die really fast and damage stacks up really quickly too. But at the same time, I still wouldn't say it's that difficult, and I'm definitely going to talk into that with way more detail coming up in this walkthrough. But yeah, buying the mods, you don't have to do it, you can do it, it's kind of entirely up to you. You're not going to see me mess too much, but please tell me the stories of how good they were in the comments, because I'm certain somebody's got some sick setups. But then there's the upgrades. So I think the upgrades in this game are bugged at the moment, and I hate saying that, guys. I'm not a person that likes to claim glitches. I will usually always blame myself before I blame the game when it comes to something like that, but I read somewhere online that apparently they're not working correctly, and who knows, that could have been written by a lunatic, but I tend to believe them because it did confuse me and I noticed it. So on my first playthrough of this game, I was upgrading the guns, and I noticed that I had the resources to upgrade them, but when I went to upgrade them, they had vanished from the list, and I didn't know why. So I had the money, I had the components, but it wouldn't let me do it. And then all the way at the end of the game, they magically came back and let me upgrade. So I played the whole game with barely any upgrades on my guns, because for some reason the upgrade menu vanished, and I couldn't understand why it did it. And then in this walkthrough, I intentionally didn't upgrade my weapons that much because I didn't really want to focus on it, and I noticed that they were there the whole time pretty much. So there's definitely something weird going on with the menu. If you've ever had a problem where you were trying to upgrade and it wouldn't let you because it didn't even give you the gun to upgrade even though you had it, it's happened to me as well, and I think Remedy knows about it, so hopefully they can work on that and get it changed. But here is the hotline. We're going to go once again into the astral plane, the land of the strange gold and black, crazy architecture, this lustrous surface, this marble-like... Oh, there we go, watch this checkpoint, by the way. So, usually in a walkthrough I wouldn't leave in something like that, because it's not as clean as it could have been, but it's important that I left that in because it can let me go on the tangent that I'm about to speak about, which is this game's fucking ungodly checkpoints. So, I fell off that, and it immediately spawned me at the start of this sequence. It spawned me in like 2 seconds. It was a good checkpoint. It was control with checkpoints. When you're in the Federal Bureau of Control building, the oldest house, you will not get the same courtesy. When you die, you go back to control points. Control points can literally be 30 minutes across the fucking map, and everything you did on that fight to get to wherever you were going when you died, you'll have to do again. Because for someone, there's some bizarre, some ludicrous, some draconian backwards ass, antiquated sense of modernity. We are aping Souls mechanics in other genres where they have absolutely no place being, and I cannot tell you how much it bugs me. I love Dark Souls, guys. It's one of my all-time favourite games. I'm starting to hate it, though, and I'm starting to hate it because devs are taking the wrong stuff. They're taking the wrong stuff and ruining their experiences with things that only work in Souls games. I said a very long time ago on a video that if you took the mechanics from Demon's Souls and you put it in an Uncharted, people would fucking hate it. People would hate Uncharted because they would call it antiquated, they would call it a relic, they would call it something that should be completely replaced because it's obsolete. And I would agree with them. Because Souls only works in the context of Souls. It's meant to be that way, because that's what it does. It's eclectic, it's like esoteric, it's weird, and it works, because the world reflects that weirdness. Everything about that series is so specific and intentional that it just works. It doesn't work here. It turns something that could have been way fun, and much more fun, into something that's frustrating. And it's not even because you die to the enemies. I've died more times in this game falling off than I ever have to an enemy. But the checkpoints don't care how you die. All they care about is frustrating you getting back to where you need to be. And every checkpoint's like that, guys. There are few moments where the game takes pity on you and it shows you what actual checkpoint design looks like and what actually good checkpoints are. One of them is in the Ashtray Maze. In the Ashtray Maze, if you get to the final encounter of that area and you die, it doesn't put you at the beginning of the maze. It puts you in like a shortcut and you get back to where you died. And it's really good, because it means that a player gets to enjoy the encounter and they don't have to repeat the last 5 minutes of gameplay that wasn't difficult but you got fucked at the end. And I don't get it. And I don't get it because Remedy didn't use this tech before. Remedy used save states, quick saves. You could save anywhere. You could save in the middle of a gunfight. You could save in the middle of a bullet entering your brain and put yourself in a death loop. It was up to you. You were in control. And when you're in control, you can make your own difficulty. Do you think checkpoints make games easy? Don't use them. Do you think fight-by-fight basis is the best setup for checkpoints? Then that's how you save state. Do you want to save state during a fight, mid-fight, every time you kill a guy? Then do it. It's up to you. And you can make your own experience. You can never complain that a game is too easy with save states or with quick saves, because it's a choice. You don't have to use them. There are people that love doing Iron Man challenges. There are people that love doing everything in one attempt. Those people are crazy, and I'm glad they exist, and it's awesome that they get these experiences, because modern checkpoint is suffering because of that. Because this idea that people want to do Iron Man runs, when in reality, it's probably like 0.1% of the community that wants to do that. Not everybody's a speedrunner. Not everybody played games in the arcade where you put 1 credit in and tried to see how far you could get and never got that far because the games were bullshit to steal your money. Like, there is a really, really good reason why checkpoints have come as far as they have. Because they make the games more fun. They just do. And there's obviously someone who disagrees with that, but fundamentally, the overwhelming majority will say that modern games have got more fun because of their accessibility, rather than the older games. The reason the older games are better to a lot of people is because they're more creative and the design is more unique. Games are easier now because of the accessibility, but it makes them a lot more enjoyable for a lot more people. And then someone like myself who wants the game to be harder can do a challenge run, can do a restricted run, can make the game harder. There's lots of ways around it. But when you make your game built off of bad checkpoints, all you're going to do is piss off the person who plays one game a year, plays it for like 30 minutes a week, and isn't having fun. And I can't understand why they would ever want to use that particular piece of design. Look at that for dangerous, Jesus. Of all the things Dark Souls did well, that's not what you should be copying. Fortunately, there should only be a handful of places where you might get tripped up by this, but if you're going to be partaking in the side missions that involve you going out of your way to places that aren't necessarily control pointed that well, you're going to bump into some one-hit kills that can happen, and you're going to be shown just how bad the runbacks can be. A really good example for me, which I don't know if anybody else did this, in the sequence we did where we did the clicker 3 times to get the hotline, I pulled the clicker once and just assumed that it was like a trippy room and I could walk into it. And I walked into it, fell to my doom, and I had to run all the way back. And it took about 5 minutes to run back. And at the very beginning of the game, when you've been through every fight and had no problems, and then you die to a pitfall, and then it shows you just how bad the checkpoints can be, it really makes you wonder why they went with that particular direction. Down here, by the way, is the ability to dodge. It's going to lead us back into the astral plane, and we're going to be pushing forward and getting the ability that is so key to survival in the early days, but at the same time, another one of those interesting design choices. So, the dodge in this game is tied to your powers. It's not tied to a stamina bar or a fatiguing system. And I'm curious what this game would look like if you could dodge maybe 2 times, 3 times, and then you had to wait for it to cool down. I'll be careful here as well. These doors do that. But do you see the checkpoint? The checkpoint is real good. It's immediate. It's what a checkpoint should be in a modern game. Like, I'm not asking to give me a checkpoint 3 times during a gunfight, but during a sequence like this, can you imagine if you had to run all the way back to a control point and come back inside here and do all that again? It would have been completely unbearable. So the developers obviously know that there's a time and a place for some sexy-ass checkpoints, but they chose to hurt their own game by not including them. And if you're familiar with my work, you'll know that I talk a lot about checkpoints. I talk a lot about this conceit of fairness and balance and what makes a fight challenging and what makes a fight cheap. These are a lot of principles that are really important to me because I'm very passionate about them, and I think that there's a certain standard that we should all adhere to now. And it isn't give the player 50 checkpoints in every room. It's give the player checkpoints when they fucking need them instead of 5 when they don't and none when they do. Like, how many times have you been in a fight where it lasted a bit longer than you thought it should and it was a real struggle and you got through it, and then afterwards you walked 10 yards, nothing happened, and you got another checkpoint? Like, there's nothing more frustrating than getting an easy spoon-fed checkpoint after a sequence that needed one. It's such an interesting thing, and I suppose it is a lot more subjective than I'm making it out to sound, because designing checkpoints is not, it's not this ultimate absolute decision of this is where a good one is, this is where a bad one is. There are moments where I believe that design like that is really obvious, but fundamentally it's kind of up to what the developer wants that sequence to be. There are some fights that are only memorable in games because they didn't give you a checkpoint, but those fights can still be challenging that way and still interesting and still fun if governed the right way. But here we are, checking out the security chief, talking to this bad boy, and now we have to go and do some industrial fun times, picking up as much as we can, striving to understand what the hiss are and what's going on exactly. This is one of those games where you can beat it and still not really have a good idea of what you're doing. It's definitely got some layers to it. There's a lot to read as well. If you're not a big fan of reading your lore, you're going to miss out on a lot of the information. But look at the signposting here. Do you see that these green, almost like traffic highway signs? Awesome, right? Always telling you where you need to be and where you need to go. But this is the suicide bomber Husk. Husk? Hiss. Husk is from Mass Effect. Same difference. This is an interesting enemy. They are going to rush you and they're going to blow up. The good thing is, if you get the ability to throw bodies later on, you can throw these guys before they blow up and make them blow up into other people. These are an enemy that are always used really elegantly. They're always there to put pressure on you or there to surprise you. I've never had a moment where I've been in a fight and I've turned around and one of those guys have been sneaking up on me. This is not Dead Space 2 where everything spawns behind you the whole time, There's some really, really nice... That's not necessarily a bad thing, it works for Dead Space 2, but it wouldn't work in this if that dude just blew up. Like, those guys are almost always done in a really, really well way, and I appreciate that a lot. You'll also notice that I'm using the shotgun. I don't like the shotgun, guys. I actually think it's kind of shit. I didn't upgrade it this run because I just, aforementioned issues with upgrading. But from what I can see with it, it's one of the guns that fails the most on detection. There's so many times when you're up close and you aim at some dude and you shoot him and it just doesn't do anything. And it's a problem when you're using a shotgun, in my opinion. With that considered, I do think that the shotgun can do a lot of damage when it works, but I don't think a normal enemy should take fucking 3 hits from it, because it's a bloody shotgun. And he should, because he's unique. He's that boss we just killed, but now he's a standard enemy. But the guns are going to be massive preference in this game. There's going to be a transition coming up here, guys, because I ran into that furnace room, and there's nothing to do in that furnace room. I ran around, I picked up a box, and then I was looking at the footage thinking, do I need to keep this in when I've really not really helped anybody or shown anything? So I just made it transition there. And now we can move down and potentially take on some plant guys. Oh no, it's just the standard his soldiers. But you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen right now, we've got a lot of those commands that the board has sent us to do to get some tools. That's a sneaky guy. But I feel like the shotgun should have no range, but if you hit somebody with it, it should kill. Because the guns in this game, there's the workhorse everyman tool, which is the one you start with. There's the shotgun, which is the close range thing. There's the pierce, which is the long range thing. And then there's the explosive one, which I've never used. But I don't even feel like I needed it, because I feel like the pierce is so good that if you can aim, that's all you'll really need. But this is our first objective in this location. There are 3 of these that want you to put these powered box onto their recipient hole. One of them's on my left over there that I'm going to conveniently not see somehow because I'm blind. I'm going to walk up to it right now. It's on my left, but for some reason I'm just tunnel visioned on the enemies. And then the other one is on the far hand side that requires a little bit more. But here are a couple more of the exploding guys. Be careful that you don't get snuck up on by those fellas. Later on, when you get the ability to levitate, they are never a problem again, because if they get too close, you fly away. It's a very powerful tool in your arsenal, but we don't get that for a while. But down here is the second of the generators, and it's all clogged up with gunk, so this is not going to work. And we have to go into a room and take on a blockage, which... I don't really understand this blockage. Maybe there's some information in the game that I didn't read. But you can see the detection on the gun here. There are times when you put your reticle on things and you shoot. Like, that's collision. That's collision. That was fine. But I hope it shows you an example of the bullets not registering. Because this is a big area where your reticle goes red, you fire. Be careful of that as well. That will hurt you if you touch the spray. I'm in a bit of a rush because when I record walkthroughs, I'm always trying to get through the areas in a decent clip. Like, you see that? Why did that miss? That shot was bang on that little nipple thing, and it missed. And it doesn't feel like it should have been collision. It's not like you have to shoot the yellow tips or they don't receive damage. You can shoot any part of them. It just... the bullet literally had no effect. And it's weird. That one was good, that one was good, that one was good. That one wasn't. Did you see? That one wasn't either. Did you see that? That was like 3 shots. 3 shots went through it, and I'm aiming on it. Like, what is that? That's... I'm not hitting the wall. It's not collision. I didn't have to move. Like, I don't know. That's a real problem. And it happens against the enemies. Like, if it just happened to that thing, I wouldn't mind. Because it's not a threat. It's when you need to land a shot and you're not landing them, and the game's fucking you in the mouth. It's really frustrating. But luckily, you don't have to use the gun. So... But from a design perspective, they've created this quite interesting gun that transforms into all these different tools. But it's really frustrating to use because the only gun that doesn't fail me is the Pierce, and it's the only gun I like using. But the Pierce is awkward to use because it only gets 2 shots, and you have to charge them, and it blinds you when you're aiming, and a million other things that make it a bit awkward. Look, I'm not seeing this at all. I don't know why my brain couldn't see that. I've passed it twice. It's one of those weird moments of just... I don't know what I was looking at in that instance, but I was not looking the right place, and I think I notice it now. Coming around this bend. Because there's a spawn here of a big enemy, your first elite enemy, and I was waiting for him. I thought the spawn was being weird, and then boom, there it is, epiphany. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. I tried to edit this kind of stuff out, but because of the way that this game is tiered, I couldn't go back and re-record it without playing all the way up to this, and I had too many other things to do, unfortunately. But there you go. Now that that's happened, there's going to be this guy turning up, who's just a standard fella. This guy turning up, who, against launch, he's just a standard fella. And then there's going to be the big boy after the exploders. Somebody's shooting a gun at me from my side. And they're shooting at me through the grating as well. There he is. Cruise around here. Try to bait out his melee. When you get close to the enemies, they do a melee attack. Their melee attack does good damage, and it's got really good tracking, so be careful. Here's the explodey guy. See you later. And then I think the elevator should be turning up after this guy goes down. And the next guy to his right. And you get to take on the big dude. So, the big dude is good in concept, but terrible in execution. He is a very armoured man who either comes with a grenade launcher or with a minigun. The minigun variant is the worst one because you can't throw his weapon back at him. He takes a massive beating, but his AI is not clever at all. So he's literally going to stand underneath me while I shoot him in the face, and he can't hit me and I can hit him. It's a real problem in the grand hierarchy of the game, because difficulty-wise, this guy's meant to be elite. He's meant to be the biggest of the big. This is probably the strongest enemy you'll face outside of boss encounters, and the main campaign doesn't really have boss encounters, which I think is absolutely boggling. But this guy can't hurt me, really. If I stand in the right place here, he can't do a thing. And as much as this is a great strategy, so it'll make a useful tactic for players that don't like this creature, this is not how this should work. I shouldn't be able to do this. And I can, and it makes it a problem. But I'm not going to do it, because the whole point of this video is to give people shit that works. Give people a way to circumvent difficulty. And difficulty is something that Control has a tough time with, as I kind of touched on earlier. There are parts of this game where the difficulty is quite high for itself, not necessarily in the grand scheme of games, but it spends a lot of time being very manageable. Like a fight like this, for instance. I love this fight. This is you in the middle pincering the enemies, and there's a lot of dudes here who are half distracted, so you can kind of bully them, but the moment they see you, they start firing rockets, and that rocket has tracking properties, and if it touches you, it does nuclear damage. This is a great opportunity to throw some stuff, to practice your aim, to like move around and be evasive. You've now got to dodge, so you've got no excuse. There was another rocket that I barely dodged. Like, the rockets are easily the most dangerous part of the game, and there's a unique just over there. He might drop something good, he's going to be very tanky. A couple more people spawning in. This is a fully fledged battle, and this is a lot more interesting than the fights we just did, because I don't have a great position of power here. One of the most important facets of game design when it comes to a difficult encounter is making sure that the playing field is levied against you or in the enemy's favour to a degree that makes it fun and interesting to overcome. There's one section in this game where that principle is skewed so far in the enemy's favour that not only is it not fun, but it's also the hardest section in the game. But it's the hardest section in the game because of those factors, not because it feels like a challenging sequence. When the threat is you don't have cover, and they do, and they're throwing all kinds of things that do massive damage to you, and you can't block it anyway, and if you fall off, you instantly die, and if you dodge the wrong way, you fall off, that, in my opinion, that's not difficulty. That is just either player error getting himself killed, or the developer giving the enemy such an advantage that it's one of those sections that's intended to be really skewed. And of course, once again, luckily, I found a really, really easy, safe strategy to do that particular sequence I'm talking about. But just because you can find a safe strategy doesn't necessarily mean it's a good design. And I'm going to come back to that idea a lot with a lot of the topics I'm going to discuss in this game, because Remedy made a game called Quantum Break. And Quantum Break is a good game, but a game that suffers because it's too balanced. Well, I say it's too balanced. The enemies are too balanced and your character's too overpowered. You're unbalanced and everyone else is balanced. And that combination of elements leads to a game that is almost never a challenge, where you are almost never in danger, and the whole thing is a bit of a joke. That is not to say that it's not fun. That is not to say that you can't have enjoyment. It's just to say if you are playing it from the perspective of somebody wanting to be challenged, you're not going to find it. I played it recently on my new PC, just to see if it was any different than I remembered. I did no abilities, pistol only, hard difficulty, which is the hardest difficulty. I did the entire first 2 acts without dying, and I stopped. Because A, I wasn't enjoying it because the game has reticle bloom, and I forget about that, and it makes the shooting feel like shit. You only get first shot accuracy, which is something that I don't care for much myself. But it was just uninteresting, because the area of that game that I came to enjoy was the powers. Dodging around with the powers is really fun. It makes you feel awesome. When you're not using them, you're just a dude running around using chest-high walls, and the game really doesn't complement that very well. But even then, I wasn't being pushed, I wasn't being challenged, I wasn't having trouble. And Control is a weird mix of that. The sins of Quantum Break have transferred over into this game in many ways, but they don't affect this game the same. That guy on the top has a rocket launcher. And he took off a lot of my HP then, even though it didn't seem like it should have hit me. It should have just splashed me a little bit, but the rockets are crazy, so be very careful. Oh, the shelters, by the way, are almost always containing of one box, so pick up the box and then leave. It's an interesting thing with the shelters. I wonder if they served a different purpose originally. See that? As soon as I got close to him, he meleeed me. You gotta be careful of that. Sometimes it's better to melee them and then shoot them, because it's a little bit like the Gears of War 2-piece. But this sequence wants you to put 3 of those power generator blocks onto the recipient, and then it will get you to the next sequence. So feel free to do that. And there's going to be a couple of enemies, but you know this by now. Also, if I sound a little bit weird, guys, I have toothache, and it's giving me a banging headache. I've never had it before. It's as bad as everybody says it is, and it sucks. But I'm going to try and grind through, because I want you to be able to see this video, because Gears is out now, and I have to focus on that. But Control is a fun game, and I like it, and hopefully this walkthrough will be interesting or helpful to the people that need it / want to watch it. But the conceit of Quantum Break and its effect on Control. This game is too easy, guys. It just is. It's too easy. But it does have moments of difficulty that spike out of nowhere. And those moments of difficulty are rarely ever difficult for the reasons that you want as a player looking for challenge. A good example is, you'll come up against a boss that if it hits you, you'll die instantly. Or you'll fall through the floor and die instantly during a boss fight. And then you have to run back on a checkpoint that's terrible, that makes you, like, super fucking miserable. Here's me thinking I've not been in this shelter, and I open it again and check it, and I already have. Quality gameplay there from myself. Things like that, like you'll be in a gunfight, you'll be absolutely decimating everybody, and then you'll get hit by a rocket and you'll die. Things like that. You'll get hit once, take massive damage, and then you won't be able to recover. It can happen a lot. And the only reason that works that way is because I'm avoiding HP upgrades. If I was upgrading my HP, the only real threat would be falling off and falling through holes, which does still happen and can still be a bit of a difficulty spike for no real reason. Because the health in this game is really interesting. It's weird. So you'll notice that when I kill bad guys, they drop these like twinkling... They almost look like weird caltrops. They're almost spiky triangle droplets on the ground. You can see a couple of them in the geometry here. If you walk near those, when you pick them up, they give you HP back. The problem with them is, they don't have any kind of vacuumous property unless you use specific mods, I would imagine. So you have to run over the place where you killed somebody to get your life back. So at the beginning of a fight, if there's 10 guys next to each other and they put you to 1 hit from death, if you kill one of those guys, you have to go towards danger to get your life back. And usually, this is a mechanic, a risk and reward system that I love. I love the idea of being aggressive gets you further in the game. Being aggressive is like the only way to play, because it forces you out of your comfort zone and you can't play like a bitch the whole time, which is the temptation for a lot of people, myself included. However, in a game like this, when you can get killed so quickly by being close to enemies, it does beg the question why the devs wanted you to ever be close to the enemies. Like, it almost feels like it was a mechanic that needed a little bit more and would have blossomed into something quite interesting. Like, I don't understand why you can't use your launch ability to pull the health to you. That seems like something that would have potentially been cool in the skill tree, or maybe something to learn. Maybe it's in the game and I haven't found it, you know? But I feel like there should have been ways where you could skillfully get the life at a distance, maybe, or maybe not necessarily at a distance, but bleed it back to yourself that doesn't involve running over the corpse of somebody you've just killed. Because it leads to the scavenger problem, doesn't it, in Call of Duty? When you kill people in Call of Duty when scavenger is a perk, they drop an ammo pack that you can pick up. How many times have you got killed looking for an ammo pack because it didn't land where you thought it should land and you needed bullets? Happens a lot. It's one of those deaths you never want to take because it always feels kind of stupid. because you were looking at the ground or getting frustrated when you should have just been getting your ammo back, because that's how it should work. I've never understood why scavenger doesn't work like when you kill somebody, it gives you ammo back. I always thought that should have been the way it should have worked. In Call of Duty 4, there was a perk called Bandolier, which completely circumvented the need for scavenger because it just gave you a shit ton of extra ammo, which I always felt was a better perk. However, in these days of Call of Duty, you know, people are so good now, Bandolier would have probably ran out, because back in the day Bandolier used to run out and you were still alive because you were on a big kill streak. But the health in this game, it works a lot like that, and it's usually not a problem ever, because you'll do most of this without taking much damage as long as you're quite mobile and you're using launch and you're a clever player putting, you know, things between you and the opponents. But it still lands you in this situation. Like right now, if I was low life and I needed to get life back, I have to run towards the most dangerous enemy in the room. It's such an interesting thing. It reminds me of oh, he has a rocket, by the way, so he's incredibly dangerous too. Fortunately, I think he has to run to a certain distance before he can shoot it. But if you've ever played shoot-em-ups or shooting games, the classic, you know, you play as a tiny ship and you shoot shit on the screen and they're really difficult, there's a mechanic in those games known as grazing, where if you're willing to put your hitbox near a bullet and get that close to it, you will get rewarded by score or super bar or whatever it is that it does in the particular game that you're playing. And it's this idea of risk versus reward, separating the good players from the not so good players or the average players. And it's something that's really interesting and really cool and plays into a lot of strategies for those games, like point blanking bosses and such. Look at this room, by the way. This is not intentional. Do you see that? That is a visual bug that can happen a lot. I had the entire end of the game be that colour, and the end of the game is meant to be red, but it was an awful diarrhea gold. And I'm telling you guys, it was the worst colour I've ever stared at for 25 minutes in my life. I hope it doesn't happen to you. Sometimes it's just fleeting, but there you go. This is also the first fight that I died on the recording. I ran into the middle of this room, there was a lot of enemies, and it did not go well for me. Which was interesting to say the least, because I couldn't honestly tell you why I died, I just got perfect AI'd, I guess. But if you use the stairs like I just did, there's a wonderful flanking spot up here that will give you a lot of safety. Just be careful in the middle of that room. If you go into it, it can end badly. But hit the control point, and now we can push on forward. But I've been looking at a lot of the reviews for Control, and a lot of the opinions that people have been giving, and I can't help but agree with some of them. Oh, by the way, guys, this is how you upgrade things. Do you see how it shows me the different guns you can buy? And then it says upgrade grip and construct spin. That's the place where occasionally the upgrade screen can be a bit goofy and not give you the options that you think you deserve or that you think you should be able to do. That was the problem that I mentioned earlier on in the run. And now we're going to be introduced to a creature that is kind of like an ambient threat. I don't know whether or not you can kill this coming up, but the conceit here is you have to power on a door and then trap it in a room. It's very simple, but for some reason I thought I'd done both of the power boxes and I only did one, so I end up doing this incorrectly. Learn from my mistakes, guys, that's why they're there. But do not worry about this creature, it's intimidating, but it really doesn't do that much. It looks awesome. And I feel like when you expose its core, you should be able to shoot it and kill it, but I've shot it in its exposed core and it didn't die. So I feel like it's one of those things that it's kind of like a force of nature, it just has to exist. A lot of effects going on in this room as well, with another one of the inverted pyramid motifs. But one of the reviews for this game, they said that it felt like something was missing, and I think I agree with that. I like this game a lot, guys. I'm a Remedy fanboy, be under no illusion. I've played every Remedy game and I love them all. I love certain ones more so than others, obviously, but fundamentally, Remedy are one of the only companies that exist now that are making purely single-player video games. They are heavily based on narratives, they're heavily based on telling stories, there's a lot of detail, they are always third-person shooters with interesting mechanics. Like, they're the last bastion of a genre of game that I adore, and I will always give them the benefit of the doubt, principally because I really like Sam Lake, I really like his team, I just really like what they do. I always have, ever since I first played Max Payne at a friend's house, and it was one of those games that was just like, this is so good, I can't believe a video game can be this good. By the way, that's the damage that rockets can do, so be very careful. Getting the ability to throw those back is so important. I neglect buying it in this run because I'm stupid like that, but I recommend it over almost any other upgrade. It's probably the best one in the game. But be very careful in this room. You're going to get introduced to a new enemy type in this room. Do you see the guys that are sitting in the chairs? They remind me of those ghosts in the courtroom in Ghostbusters. These guys. They're essentially weird, like, chair-sitting dudes that fly around firing stuff at you. They're kind of a different version of the other flying enemy, but nowhere near as dangerous. They'll still jack you up, though, so be very careful. But when I say that something feels like it's missing, I feel like it's both twosome. It's in the story and it's in the gameplay. I like the gameplay, I like the idea of it, but I feel like there's a central gameplay loop that isn't there. And I don't know what it is. I don't know exactly what it is what's missing. I don't know exactly what it is how you fix it. Ooh, he has a grenade launcher, very distinct sound. This is another one of those weapons you can fire back at him if you have the upgrade, so it's very much worth getting. There's a part of it that it doesn't come together to form a coherent whole. What is here is fun, and I like it, but it doesn't feel complete. And I don't know if it has to do with the way that the enemies are arranged against you, so that they never get put into a perspective where they can really put you in a position of a disadvantage and weakness and feel like you're in a dangerous place. Because I don't know if you've noticed this, guys, but I'm not scared of this guy who I'm throwing shit at. I'm not scared of any of these guys. The only thing I'm scared of in this room is rockets. I do not respect any of the enemies. There's one fight in this game I respect because it's anchored towards the enemy, and it's really, really, really awkward. But other than that fight, and maybe there's two fights actually that I respect. For the most, I'm the demon in this game, you know. Jessie is the bad guy. She's the person running rampaging through this building, killing everything, and they're the ones that should be afraid. And that's how it feels. And when it feels like that, you lose a lot of the tension. Especially when you're this capable. Like, look at this. It's fucking nuts. And it's the same issue that Quantum Break had, only Quantum Break had it way more than this game, because this game does it a bit better. The enemies are more dangerous. You do take damage in this game. Like, there are times in Quantum Break where you just don't take any damage, because the enemies are too fair and you're just ridiculous. And admittedly, this is not a good example of a fight where the game is all that balanced, because I just destroyed 6+ people in 10 seconds and it was effortless. And I don't even have that many upgrades yet. When you get more upgrades, guys, the abilities just become absolutely preposterous. And it brings you to the question, does launch need a nerf? Which the answer is no. But is it too strong? To which the answer is almost universally yes. Launch is so good and so overpowered, it supersedes almost any other ability in the game. But it's really fun too. And you'll notice a lot of people mentioning on the internet right now that Remedy have made a better Star Wars game than the Star Wars game that's coming out in November, because I can guarantee you guys, the Force abilities in that game aren't going to have shit on launch in this game. Like, this game reminds me of Force Unleashed, and all I did in Force Unleashed is block, dodge, and chuck shit at stormtroopers, because it was so goddamn fun. And it begs a really interesting question, doesn't it? Is it okay that the game isn't as challenging as it could be? That the game isn't as balanced towards challenge as it would be if things were different? If launch is so much fun to use? And I feel like there's a part of me that's definitely okay with it. I love the fact that something's strong. I love the fact that I can focus on one ability and it's ridiculous the whole game. Because it means that my build and my player choice has value and meaning, and I can play the game my way. I've been playing a game called Remnant from the Ashes, and it's a game that has some of the best shooting I've used in a while. But everything else was designed by fascists who want to watch the world burn. So there are, for every mechanic in this game that I'm going to say is too balanced, there's a mechanic in Remnant that's dog shit and shouldn't exist, boggles the mind and frustrates the brain. because that's just the way it works. In Remnant, I did not level a single rejuvenative or healing or damage reducing or armor based skill in that game because I wanted to do damage. I didn't want to take damage. I wanted to be weak, but I wanted to kill quickly. That's my thing in games. I like to destroy or die trying. In that game, I was weaker damage wise than my friend who was upgrading everything. I focused on damage, he focused on pretty much everything including like HP and armor and defensive stats and stuff, and he ended up doing more damage than I did. That is not how a video game should ever work. It just isn't. I should have made his damage look laughable, because I compromised my own build to focus on dealing damage, and in the end I dealt no fucking damage because that game is drunk. Oh, by the way, new enemy now, guys. This is one of the most dangerous enemies in the game, but he's also a cream puff. He's unique, which means he's going to take an absolute beating. The idea is, throw something at him with launch to get rid of his bricks, then he'll be vulnerable, then hit him 2 to 3 more times with launch. That just then was unlucky. There was an explosive barrel that he hit with a rock. That's the only reason I took all that damage. A couple of enemies are going to spawn with this guy. I really need to go down into the middle here and get some life back, because if I don't, I'm going to die. Once again, I'm quite comfortable in my ability to be close to these enemies because I'm confident in how they work, and it ends up not paying off for me just then. I timed that incorrectly. You can run close to him when he doesn't have his shield, and you can get away from him, but you don't want to do it the way I did it because I did it wrong. But yeah, break his shield with launch, hit him with whatever you want afterwards, repeat until he's dead. And there he is. And then this guy's going to hit me with a massive crit. So then that guy hits me with 1, and it puts me to mad low life. But do you see how hard this game can be if you play it that close? People hurt you a lot. And there's a transition just then of me running around quite confused on what I was supposed to do because I'd forgot. All you have to do is go back to the control point that you didn't cleanse because the boss guy turned up, and then it'll be back to where we are right now. So I apologise for that jarring edit. There was nothing other than like a crossfade that I could have done, and I've not used that many crossfades in this one. No cross dissolves, no cross zooms, whatever you want to call them, depending on which one you're using. But now we're heading towards the lab, the Old Boys Club mission, and we're definitely getting into the full brunt of the game now. But I was talking about this notion of something being missing. I felt that, definitely. Oh, here's one of the puzzles too. These puzzles are kind of goofy.
Assuming he's not.
They're one of those where they look more complicated than they are, and then once you start touching them you realise that they're not too bad. And here's the HRA lab. So this has a room that has a bunch of computers that need a bunch of cards to go into them to open up this computer here. I don't know if this order is random. I feel like it was different than the first time I played. But if you look around the room, there are a bunch of whiteboards, and the whiteboards are going to give you an idea of where the cards go. And it's just a case of trial and error putting them in the right places. If you're really interested in seeing which ones they are, if this is the same every time, just pause the video and see which one I put in which computer, and then just line them all up that way. I don't really like this puzzle personally. There's a couple of puzzles in this game that I don't personally care for. The other one was the clock puzzle, but for some reason the Ocean View Hotel seems to be quite random. There seems to be instances where you don't do the same puzzles to navigate that area, and if you don't get the clock one, like I don't get the clock one, then I would be very grateful, because when I was first doing that, the game did not say that you could move the hands manually, so I was trying to stop them precisely as they were ticking around, and it was really, really frustrating. But the plot, so in Control there is a ludicrous amount of things to read. There is so much world building. There's so many pieces of character that have been put into all kinds of facets of the story, and it's really good. A lot of it's really fun to read. Some of it you wonder what the fuck the point is in it, and then later on it's foreshadowing for something and it's pretty cool. But fundamentally there's a lot of information in this game to take in, and a lot of it is optional. All the side missions are going to give you more info. All the side conversations are going to give you more info. This is a game that is filled with opportunities to learn more about its world and its characters. And unfortunately, because this is a minimalist walkthrough, you're going to see none of that. And if you play this game like that, because there are people that do that, some people skip cutscenes on their first playthrough, some people don't give a shit about the story. If you do that, you're going to get to the end of the game and not really have much of an idea what's going on. And even if you watch the cutscenes but you skip everything else, you're also going to have pretty much a fractured idea of what's going on too. And I felt like there was a hook that was missing. I really did. Because to break it down into its lowest form, there's a puzzle here, by the way. There are red blocks in the environment that you have to break that are going to open that doorway up. And once you've done it, the door opens and you can proceed that way.
Keep him safe.
Even though I don't think I'm supposed to go that way, I'm going towards Black Rock Processing, which is down here. But this might be considered spoiler territory, guys, so if you're watching a walkthrough and you're worried about spoilers, I don't know why you're here, but I'm going to give you a warning, because you'd be surprised by the amount of people that complain about this shit. So Jessie and her brother were exposed to a paranatural entity when they were younger in their hometown. This particular creature ended up embedding itself into them somehow, and that is the reason why Jessie has this predilection towards these gifts. Or that's what it seems like on the surface. However, the Federal Bureau of Control came and seized the site where this all happened, covered it all up, stole away Jessie's brother, and then she's been trying to find her brother ever since. There's been an incident in this building from the people who covered up that incident, because they have essentially used an item that they found that caused this whole thing to begin with, and by using this particular item, it has opened up this portal that leads to the place where Jessie and her brother found this seemingly, benevolent force. But unfortunately, it's opened this gate to the Hiss, who are not a nice force. The Hiss are very much antagonistic, and they've come through and started causing havoc. Jessie's ended up finding this building, she's come inside, she's realised she has this affinity towards the gun that she gets, towards being able to access the building, towards being able to still contact with this entity that she's been with so long. And she ends up inheriting the mantle of director from the previous director, who is the reason that pretty much all of this has happened. And it is her job to kind of understand what's going on, kind of get ahead of it, and hopefully find her brother. So, story-wise, it's a decent place to start. The problem is, you start with almost all of that information. You start with all the bullet points that you need to not give a shit. And that's a problem from a narrative perspective. For a lot of reasons, but fundamentally, if you have the biggest hooks of the story, and it's the little hooks that you're there playing then to find out, you have lost the biggest impact you will have on an audience. There are a couple of larger hooks in this game, but a lot of them are easy to kind of see, and they don't have the impact that they need to have to be memorable. So you find a lot of your time in this game, if you're like me, you're curious about what's the bigger picture. Because the information that you're finding, that you're looking towards, is all the smaller picture stuff. It's all, why did the director do what he did? Why does Jessie have the powers? What's this thing talking to Jessie? It's all the little stuff, the nuance. But the bigger picture just kind of isn't there for a lot of places, in my opinion. Because you're looking for your brother, so you have an idea that he's here. Oh, by the way, guys, there's a room in the other motel here that has the right setup of things. If you move the other room to mirror that room, you'll get the key off the desk. I kind of rushed through it there because I've already done that room a few times, so it looked really quickly, but just pause it if you didn't see it and line it up. But Jessie's emotional hook is finding her brother, who she knows or she believes to be in this building. You're learning about her brother, and then when her brother turns up, he has almost no effect on the story at all. And every piece of effect he does have is kind of goofy, because instead of it being like, this is why it's like this is the thing, this is how it works, he's just kind of weird. And of course, the game did warn of this. At the very beginning, she says this is going to be weirder than normal, right? But it's weird in a way that doesn't seem to service the plot. He's been corrupted by the hiss, he's been experimented on by the Bureau, and he's kind of not himself. He's kind of broken. And you would think it would lead to him being essentially set up to be the final boss, to be set up to be the reason why this is all happening. It's like a manifestation of his rage, and the hiss are perhaps using him to project themselves and all this other stuff, which it might be something like that. Once I said, guys, I don't have all the information yet. But he just kind of comes off as like character to anchor Jesse to the building, and then the building is just goofy and crazy because goofy and crazy things are happening. And it never feels like it gets to that great and meaningful payoff with it. It just kind of feels like you spend the game finding your brother, then you find your brother, and it has no emotional or narrative effect on anything. Because he's just, oh yeah, your brother's completely gone, he's mad in the head now, and everything is still happening as it was before, and it's changed absolutely nothing. So the stakes that they set up originally end up falling really flat for me, and I'm hoping that when I replay and I get more information, it'll make more sense. But there's a couple of moments like that where this is going to be big spoiler territory, guys, so if you care about this, try to skip forward like 5 minutes. But the entity that both Jesse and Dylan are connected with is a creature known as Polaris. It's known as the Hedron. It's essentially like a strange geometric shape thing. I don't really know too much about it because, once again, I haven't done any more further reading. But this thing that seems to be not necessarily the bad guy could have easily been set up to be the bad guy. You know, it was being used to be transported into our world, and then it's using people to kind of manipulate them and stuff. And I almost expected that the Hedron had created the hiss, and it was using them to take over, and it was just manipulating us the whole time to set this up, and then at the end you would fight the Hedron as the boss. And that's just not kind of how it went. It went a different way, and I'm glad it went a different way, because I kind of liked the way it went, but it felt like you spent the whole game looking for an answer towards this voice and this visual effect that keeps happening that's guiding you. And then it's like, oh look, it's the thing, blah 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 blah. Oh, that was sad. Like, it felt like it just fizzled. There was all this build-up, and I say all this build-up, there wasn't that much build-up. It was more so my inquisitive mind and your inquisitive mind more so than anything, because at the very start of the game you see a motif that you're going to see throughout this full game of this undulating, rotating pattern. And every time you see that, it means that this other plane entity is affecting you, is somehow interacting with you, and it's guiding you like the North Star that it is. It spends the whole game... Look, it's there, you see it? That's the effect. It's showing you where to go. And there's a new enemy here. This creature, for some reason, reminds me of the Bloodstarved Beast. And I hate to say that because I'm falling into that pattern of every games journalist that references a Souls game when it comes to video games, because Souls games invented video games, everybody knows this. But this is a really unusual creature. The closer it is to you, the more it hurts you. It is a proximity-based damage, it feels like. And all you do is you walk towards where the chromatic aberration is its strongest and where the blurring is happening, and then it will manifest, and then you throw something at it, and hopefully it will die. Or then again, maybe it's not proximity based. That time it just fired a big load of jizz at my face. So yeah, that thing is a unique enemy that does not turn up that often. And I suppose we should be grateful, because if those things turned up with normal enemies, it would get real hairy real quickly. But that is one of the more spooky enemies, one of the more tense moments. But as soon as you realise what it does, it's really simple. I really love the environments in this game as well. I know some people are going to have problems with them because a lot of it is just, you know, urban and industrial and buildings and office places and very clerical, but I love that kind of domesticated location. It's one of my favourites.
Other dimensions leak in.
It also works really well in this game because they juxtapose it with really unusual places too, and a lot of perspective warping and Escher-like extractions of normal-looking buildings. So there's, if you look for it especially, some of it's a bit more nuanced and hidden. Like if you look upwards, guys, a lot of the times you can see the roofs extending into forever, which is a really, really nice touch, but if you don't look up, you never see it. And obviously if you look up in these places, you're just going to see tiled roofs and spotlights, but... Anyhow, Black Rock Quarry is where we're off to. It's currently level 5. You have to touch this folder next to the television to get the key. This is one of the only areas in the game where you have to touch one of those icons. You'll notice I've been avoiding them because usually they're just lore. They're just information collectibles. And then I'm going to skip the elevators in this walkthrough, guys, because you spend far too much time sitting on elevators. And judging by the reticle, we now have the Pierce. This is a charged sniper rifle equivalent of your one-hit kill weapon. This is the only gun in this game that I would say is really, 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 really good. Everything else has kind of just been not very fun to use for me, but this is one I use a lot. It's awkward, and it's not the simplest gun to use, but if you can aim, you'll have a good time with it. But pick up the box, see what we've got inside. A nice threshold. Is that Remnant? It's hard to see because the res is so low on my preview window. But the Black Rock Quarry is interesting because one of the things you learn in this game is that the building itself has been pulled into different astral planes. So once we enter the quarry, you'll notice the quarry's outside and you can see the sky. And it's really interesting because it's just so fantastical, this idea of being so far underground and being in this building in this built-up city, yet not being in this city. I'm also going to get snuck up on here, guys, so be very careful. There's a guy on my right who's about to introduce himself rudely. There it was. And he hurts. He hurts a lot. He should have killed me, and I don't know why he didn't. You'll notice that was one of the rare times where launch fails. Launch would not pick up something and throw it at him. He was too close, apparently. So I could have easily died then, while I was sniping these guys. But this gun, do you see what it's doing? If I could change one thing about this gun, it would be that when it charges, it flashes. And when it flashes, it's so blinding. I just wonder why they thought that was a good idea. It has to be a balance conceit to try and nerf your ability to shoot it too quickly. Because the amount of times when I'm aiming at somebody waiting for it to charge and then it flashes and I see stars for like a second and then they've moved is way too high. But run across the catwalk and then we can go over here towards the objective. A lot of these areas are going to make more sense when you can levitate through them. The ability to fly in this game, I don't think it's half as good as it needed to be, and it frustrates me a lot, but it's still a cool feature. Mobility is something more games need to do because mobility is absolutely awesome, and as much as I feel that the mobility in this game is good as it is, adding flying is always a good thing, even if the flying controls is a little bit subpar, in my opinion. But pick up your loot, keep moving forward. And apparently this game has a season pass. Have you heard about this? That seems really weird to me, because I am inherently untrusting of season passes. I've been bitten so many times. Gears of War 4, trash. Arkham Knight, trash. Like, at this point, I don't buy season passes on principle, regardless of how much I love the game, because they're always disappointing. They always disappoint you, and it always leads you to that analysis, doesn't it, that they're essentially cannibalizing the game and removing things intentionally to sell them to you later. And I hate that mentality, and I hate having those thoughts, but it just feels so fucking true, doesn't it? When was the last time you paid for a season pass where you feel like you got what you deserved? Because it must have been Fallout 3. Because I just can't think of one. Like, season passes are so disappointing. And I don't understand why. They don't have to be, they just oftentimes are. As something randomly explodes there and looks very pretty. But cleanse the control point, guys. Move forward towards the quarry. You'll notice that I'm now rocking the shotgun and the sniper. I'm doing the classic Halo combination. Even though that combination's probably been in like Unreal Tournament before Halo was even an idea. But you know what I mean. Stop being so cultured, you gamers, you. That guy there has a rocket. Be careful of him. And then the guy on my side has a shotgun, so put him down. But do you see how ridiculous the launch is? It is so nuts how good this ability is. And then whenever the ability doesn't work, you can shoot them with a gun that hits really hard. It's a really fun combination. But this gun is not immune to putting your reticle on people and them not dying. It can happen with this, but it only happens at long range. But look at this! Look how ridiculous this is! It's so ridiculous. An entire room of dudes. Pacified. Effortlessly. And I'm not some professional control player, guys. Everybody can do this. That's how good this move is. That's the reason I've chosen it for the walkthrough, because it's that good, and I'm not really doing anything that interesting to do it. Like, if it had really interesting controls... Can you imagine if the launch controlled, like, the skateboard in Skate? Anybody play that game? That is a game where, just to jump, you had to hold down on the right analog and flick it up. And it sounds easy, doesn't it? But doing a kickflip into a grind and then landing it on Skate is harder than doing like a 45 million point combo in Tony Hawk with every manual, every grind, and every possible 1080 stupid vert move into reverts, into bloody flatland tricks, into everything. Like, you can't even begin to understand how difficult Skate was. Skate was one of those games that had a real skill ceiling and a really high skill floor too, because trying to do a varial kickflip, I think I got it 1 in 50,000 attempts. It was just, I don't know if the controls were just not up to par, or if the game was just so skillful and I was too retarded, but suffice it to say, that game was hard as shit to do stuff, and if you saw people good at it, you knew they were good. Can you imagine if throwing the telekinesis required that level of input, practice, and mastery? It'd be kind of awesome, but then nobody'd be able to use it, would they? I couldn't use it for a walkthrough because you'd have to put 50 hours into learning how to bloody do it. So that's another one of those catch-22s, isn't it? The eternal paradox between, do you make something difficult to do and satisfying to learn, or do you make something easy to do and accessible for almost everyone? Because games these days champion accessibility more so than high skill ceilings, and the games that do the high skill ceiling thing are almost never celebrated universally to the same extent. And it stems from the human nature, doesn't it, of nobody wants to lose. Nobody wants to lose to somebody who's put in a lot more time than they're able to put in, because they can't play games 10 hours a day. They play games, 2 hours a week. And it can be frustrating, especially in multiplayer. That's why people don't like pay to win. Because fundamentally, pay to win means that people can get access to things that they shouldn't have access to, and they can supersede being skillful with ridiculously overpowered tools. And it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because the whole notion of pay to win is anti-gamer, but pro-consumer. Because how many people do you think buy that shit? The only reason it exists is because it makes money. If people didn't buy it, it wouldn't exist. It would have gone the way of the dinosaurs. But someone's fucking buying it. So as much as we like to grumble and we like to say, like, don't buy, who buys loot boxes, who does this, who does that, like $400 fucking billion worth of someone does that, right? And it's really frustrating. But here is another one of those guys that likes to throw rocks at you. So hit him with launch. There's 2 of them as well, so be careful. You'll notice I'm backing out now because I really don't want to be here. If they hit me with that stuff, it'll probably kill me. And these guys are actually quite aggressive too. I like this enemy a lot because he's fair. If you let him do what he wants to do, he will wreck you. Ooh, that's something else I need to tell you as well. Do you notice how the enemies have a plus sign next to their HP? The universal sign for health in video games? That means that there is an orb around here, one of those things, and it's healing them. If you do not kill the orb, they will get their HP back indefinitely, and it can make the fight a lot longer. It's not the worst thing in the world, because you can outdamage the healing, but it's going to make it way harder than it needs to be, so I recommend always focusing on the orbs at the beginning if you can. And this particular encounter here is kind of a lengthy one because of the big fellows, but it's not a bad one. There's just so many positions of advantage you can take. See that? That was the shotgun not registering. Admittedly, it was a decent distance, so maybe it's the one pellet that doesn't have that much range, but there's no reason for that pellet not to register. Second one did, and they were the same distance pretty much, so... Just be careful, guys. I don't know what it is, I don't know why it exists, and I hate it. I hate it almost as much as I hate this fucking toothache. Almost. But now that you've powered this up, we're going to be able to go back towards that platform behind us. There's a switch on the platform. It's going to set off the detonations. Just behind me where the cables are. Follow the cables. You'll notice that Polaris goes up to that doorway to kind of show you that that's what you should be looking at. And then once you've blown this, you can pick up the rock. Some really nice destruction technology in this game. Nice detail. There's all kinds of like small details that Remedy does so well. Especially when you're in the office buildings and you break stuff and everything's breaking and crumbling and the papers are everywhere. And as you back out here now, guys, it's going to spawn some of these natural phenomena, guys. All they kind of do is roll around, and if they get close to you, they do a lot of damage, but you can warp through them. So there's almost no planet where you're slow enough to take enough damage to die from them. And the HP in this game is pretty generous when you get into a fight, as long as you kill something. And then all you need to do now is backtrack all the way to Marshall. Now we've got the Black Rock, we can start doing some slightly more interesting stuff. Getting to the full meat and potatoes of the game. And you can teleport as well, which is one of the good aspects that they've seemed to have stolen from the bonfire ideas. However, teleporting in games was not invented by Dark Souls, so we shouldn't give it credit it doesn't deserve. And there you go. Extra ability points, which I'm now going to spend. And check all your mods, check all your guns, check everything you can. Make sure they're all leveled up appropriately to the area that you're going. And then let's try and find Dylan in My Brother's Keeper. We're now coming up on the more difficult part of the game. There's a couple of fights coming up in the latter areas, which are definitely tougher than the stuff you've done so far, but in the grand scheme of video games, they're not that bad. There's a fight in this room. This is one of the rooms from the promotional material. I love this room because of the Venetian effect and that awesome contrasting yellow. The colour in this game and the general aesthetic has got some really, really cool stuff going for it. Here come guys with rockets, and be very careful. One of the problems with rockets that I haven't mentioned that I really need to is that when you try to catch them sometimes, Jessie will catch the wrong thing and you'll still get fucked. Additionally, she'll catch them late and they'll hit you anyway. One of the worst things that can happen is you'll catch the rocket, it'll curve towards you, you'll try to fire it, and you'll fire it, but it'll hit the cover near you, and it will do more damage to you than it has any right ever to. That's the type of stuff that can happen a lot, so be real careful with the rockets. What you'll notice is when I want to use the rockets, I will put myself in a neutral place, I'll try my best to get good distance, and then I'll wait for it to get real close, and then I'll do it. And it just stems from all the times I've tried to do it and I've died. Which is actually 0, but I've taken a lot of damage, so it's good to know. It's a good habit to get into. And it's the same with the heavy guy with the grenades. When the heavy guy turns up with his grenade launcher, there's almost no point in attacking him because you do so little damage unless you've got a super good mod or really good upgraded weapons. So I just wait for him to fire grenades because it does way more damage than you do. And if you throw stuff at him all the time, you're going to be out of your energy by the time you can throw his stuff back at him, so it just makes a lot of sense to not do that. And then this room coming up here, guys, if you want a good positional advantage, if you back up to this door, you can use the third-person cover trick, as it's known, to exploit this angle and take on these enemies from a position of safety. Look at him curving the rockets, man. He's shooting the wings off a fly, that dude. Guy's a beast. Fortunately, launch is so broken. These guys aren't really much of a threat. Just watch out for those rockets. And here's a question, guys. How are you finding this game on console? Because I was watching the Digital Foundry, and it pretty much said that every version of this game has some interesting performance moments. Is the performance putting you off the game? Have you not even noticed it? Do you think it's fine? Are you okay with it? Because from what I was seeing, some of the moments when the frames were dropping, it was just completely unacceptable. And I just don't understand how they can get away with releasing it in such a state. It's just not fair. When you pay $60 for a game, it should be functional. And when the frame rate's dropping to like sub 20, what are they doing, man? Admittedly, this is a beautiful game with lots of effects and it definitely pushes the technology, but there's no excuse. Oh, by the way, be very careful in this room. This room is dangerous. These enemies are unusual because not only do they have a really fast projectile, but they have the ability to mob you. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this enemy's killed me more than any other enemy in the game. Because the first time you bump into them and they shoot the barbs at you, it does so much damage, you will almost always die before you realise. And if you are engaging long distance with one of them, when you try to back up, there's one behind you all the time. This enemy has a tendency for coming behind you, and I don't know how they do it, but I've died to them about 3 times, and in this game that's a lot. I've died to Gravity about 10 times. Gravity is still heavyweight world champion. But these plant dudes, the spore people, like, see this guy? They love being close. And aiming gets really fiddly when you're that close, and because I'm not upgrading my melee ability, I don't really go to it that often. But something I haven't spoken about, there are parts of this game that are covered in these spores that you're seeing, in this mould. A lot of people have been referencing Last of Us with it. You know, Last of Us did not invent mould and pathogens taking over bodies like that. I think that's been around since the dawn of time. But it is very reminiscent of the clickers, so I understand why they say that. But there are parts of this game where that mould is prevalent, and if you go towards it, it hurts you. I don't actually know what you're supposed to do about that if you get an upgrade later on or a way to cleanse it, but those areas have been pretty much indecipherable for me because I haven't found a way around them and I haven't tried. But this area here is really important, guys, because on the next mission objective, the game wants you to come back here, and I always forget that. I always forget that that's what it wants me to do, and I get a little bit lost. So there's going to be a transition getting back here, so remember this room, because you have to come back here again. But flick the light switch 3 times, rule of 3s, and then you have to traverse the Ocean View Motel once again. I like the idea of the Ocean View Motel, because it reminds me of... It has that crazy, like, time is convoluted, you know, you're in purgatory, everything's repeating itself, the Groundhog Day, you know, the classic kind of sci-fi Twilight Zone trope of there's just this sleepy, dusky hotel that is perpetually in a state of flux between the borders of time. So it's a really, really cool idea. The problem with it, which is a thing I say a lot, something's cool, but... is that all this is glorified padding in the face of puzzle solving. You come here several times, do the same thing repeatedly, and nothing of worth or value happens here in the main story from what I've seen. There's no greater meaning. There's no higher plane of understanding. It's just come here, do puzzle, leave the same way you left the last time. And I feel like they've kind of underused that area, because I love the idea of... Remember the doors in the Matrix? How the Keymaster could take you to that place behind the doors, where it was a corridor full of doors, and each one of them led somewhere different? The idea that someone can tap into a place that is beyond time, beyond space, beyond our understanding, is cool as shit. It's why, as much as, you know, those Matrix movies weren't the best when it comes to story and matching what the first one did, they still had a lot of interesting creativity and fun parts of them to make them enjoyable movies. And it's things like that where this game is obviously, you know, heavily influenced and trying its best to do stuff. Like, it's got that Twin Peaks vibe, doesn't it? It has that kind of surreal, dreamlike state of, is this real, is this reality? But then it's just stereotypical puzzle 3 times and then nothing else. And I really hope there's a side quest that pans more into that place, but it just feels like it's the Beetlejuice waiting room of game design, where it's there, it's unique, but it doesn't do much. But let's get the object of power, the Benikoff TV, which I believe is the one that's going to give us the ability to levitate. But access the control point, do your countermeasures, do your ability points, do your mods, whatever you need, and then continue onwards. This is an interesting segment because there's lots of areas here that show you the optional objects of power and weird parts of the game. That's terrible aim, good for me. There's him firing back. See the damage that just did? Took all his shield and 90% of his life. And he dodged because I'm not doing it correctly. I hit him with that, and then throw the object and it would kill. I'm not at the distance where it'll lock on though, so it won't do that, but that's not to worry. These soldiers are pulling aggro for me. The commander troop people with the Lewis gun. Here's a question for you folks. Did anybody think that the game was going to give you access to the Lewis gun? Because I was really hoping it would. I like that gun a lot. That is a gun that belongs on airplanes, and these dudes are running around with it. It is a really, really cool tool. But I would imagine that... Is it that effective against them? I would hope so. It's a goddamn Lewis gun. But I don't know too much about the hiss. Maybe they're not affected by conventional ballistics. Here we go. Stretchy corridor TV. Always a fan favourite in Remedy games, and thus manifests into a literal stretchy corridor. You'll notice that there's a lot of those as well. Bureau alerts. A lot of the times as you're going through this game, they're going to be updating you with these optional objectives. I've not done any of those yet, because I've been focusing on the main missions, of course. This is a boss fight, by the way. This is probably the hardest boss fight in the game that I've come across on the main campaign. And it's just because you can get hit really hard in this room. And if you have some upgrades on some of your abilities, you'll probably be perfectly fine here. For instance, if your gun has got a better mod on it, you'll do some serious damage to this guy. I'm just going to pretty much use my launch to the best of my ability. But once again, do you see how the room is very dramatically bathed in red? And there's so many hues, and it's all vapor-like and miasma and foggy. It can be super tough to even see where the enemy is, unless you use launch. And as much as I understand the aesthetic, and I get what they're going for, like, it's just... The visual clutter is so needless when it comes to being effective. And it's something you're going to have to try and get used to, because there's a lot of it in this game. But you are going to get rushed by a couple of guys. I thought he had a rocket launcher, but he doesn't. That's the reason I ran away from him. If I'd have known, I would not have run. He just has a normal gun, and someone else has a rocket launcher, which I just ended up catching and nearly dying as I did so. So, see what I mean? This room can escalate really quickly, and wherever the rocket guy is, he's the guy that needs your attention. Because he's the guy that's the most dangerous, but you're not going to have the easiest time seeing him, because you can't really fucking see anything. The bloody room is so red. And the checkpoint is all the way back where the control point was, so if you die on this, you have to run all the way back in, which is not the most convenient, but it's not the worst by any means. There was me running forward to get some HP, and a couple more guys clean him up. The boss is so weak right now, and then he hits me with that, but one or two more hits with launch and he's done. So, as much as I'm one hit away from death, so is he. And we killed the boss. It doesn't end the fight, so you have to be very careful. I'm going to go all the way over there to try and get some of that with the looks of this. Wow, 2 missed moves. Racism. There we go. And that's the end of the boss. If you can do that, guys, you've pretty much got the chops to do anything in the game. And it's just difficult because you can't really see. If the visibility was better, it wouldn't even be anything. And I often feel like the balance there is that you can't see. That's one of the true enemies. The true boss is the visibility. But use your abilities, use your tools, you'll be fine. And then we can go back to the astral plane and we can start using the levitate. So, the reason I don't like this move, mainly it's how it works and it's how it's mapped. So when you play on PC, when you jump, if you hold the spacebar, you will start to levitate. You'll levitate up to a point, and then you'll start coming down. And as you're falling, if you press the spacebar, you will stop your fall by levitating again. And you can use this at any point. The problem with this move is that when you're falling, you can't go up. So if you fall off the edge, you can't hold spacebar and start levitating. Instead, all you'll do is slow your descent till you die. So the whole point in this levitation is only useful if you're jumping into it. If you do not jump into levitate, you will fall. There's no way, seemingly, to salvage it. So what will end up happening is, if you're like me, I have a really sensitive keyboard. It's got, like, it's a K70 Corsair rapid fire with some of the fastest response times on the keys. And it's super sensitive. So there are times when I try to, like, to just do a jump and hold it, and then I'll go to do something else, and then I'll start falling. Like, there are times when I've held it, and she falls anyway. Like, there are these weird moments where I don't know if it's my keyboard or the game, but you'll accidentally interrupt the levitate, and then you're falling, and you can't stop it. You know you're falling, you know you're going to die, and there's nothing you can do to get out of it. And the checkpoints are never kind, so you have to run back from someplace 6 weeks away, get really frustrated. And I didn't think it'd work like that. I thought the levitate would be just a fly button. I thought it would be limited to energy, so you couldn't do it for too much, but it's not. The fly doesn't even have energy. The fly has its own time limit, and it doesn't feel very good, in my opinion. It feels like a half-baked idea that puts you in danger more so than it helps. And I'm not going to use it that much, because the amount of times I use it and I fall off and die is far too high. And it's unfortunate too, because I think the animation looks good, and I like the idea of it. It's just when you're more vulnerable while flying, I don't see the benefit. And it's never more vulnerable from the enemies, because the enemies can't do anything when you're flying, they're worthless. But it's when you come down and you don't even land where you want to land, because you're somewhere bloody else, and boom, you die because of gravity. So yeah. Levitate is a cool ability that's got a lot of good functions, but the biggest function it has in my repertoire is getting me killed. Use it with caution, and hopefully you will avoid the many pitfalls I fell into. But this is the cell that leads to P6, that's the code name for Dylan. This is where they've had him all captured and everything. This is one of those weird parts of the game where you spend all this time traversing all the way over here, and then he's all the way over somewhere else. Like the princess is in another tower. Whoopsie. Could have messaged you on the radio that we have Dylan and he's over here, but never mind. And then I like to run around this room to see if there's anything in it, and there probably is something in here, but I don't think I found it. I would imagine it's things that you have to levitate towards, like there was a chest on that wall just then, but I'm not really in the business of just getting one chest, and I can't really be asked to double check around, so I'm probably just going to leave. Maybe it's the best chest in the world, guys, make sure you get it. But we now have to go back to Emily. Best way to go back to Emily is to find a control point and teleport. But these doors here, which I'm almost certain are either masking loading or are a nigher autistic dedication to world building, because making the player wait because it's a security door in the context of the fiction is a level of detail I can definitely get behind, even though it is kind of over the top. But there was the fast travel, back to the boardroom, back to Emily to see what she's going to ask us to do. I believe we're going to have to go and look for Dylan now on the upper levels, and Dylan's going to do his best levitating psychopath rendition, and then we can carry on to whatever the next thing is. God, I wish you could get that Lewis gun. I wonder if it's a bonus. DLC, maybe. So yeah, find the prime candidate program. This is the part of the game where you're thinking, this is going to get really, really interesting. We're going to learn so much. Oh, here we go. Why did they bother with the hiss? All they needed to do is put one of those radar dishes everywhere, and then Jesse would have never been able to stop this crisis. If the hiss had invented those radar tripods, all would have been dead. Humanity, as we know it, would have been conquered. But here is this location. You'll remember this area. We've been here before. It was also from the early release footage of the game. I wonder what all the levitating people thing is about. Do you think that the devs saw it in a movie or saw it in like a musical and thought it looked really cool and atmospheric? Because the people float, but I don't know why. Like, the hiss sometimes start in the air and then they come down. But do you think it's just to try and give the illusion that something very strange is happening? Oh, by the way, this is the part where I get a little bit lost as well. Remember when I told you to remember that room that's past security? Where we saw where Dylan was on that computer? That's where you need to go. You get there by going through the medical. What I do when I get to this point of the game, in the back of my brain, I know that's where I need to go, but I really don't like medical because of those fungi people. So I try to avoid going through there as much as I can, but you have to. And I usually look around several times going in the wrong direction, hoping I'm going to find it, and then I realise I'm doing it wrong, and then I find it. This is good as well. So apparently, Jesse can take down, you know, creatures from a different dimension beings beyond the construct of time and our understanding, but she can't cross a 2-inch rail on a broken window. And she can fly. Yeah. The Federal Bureau of Control is a fascinating building. But, yeah, go to that place I mentioned, guys. This is just going to be me trying to navigate using the map and doing a bad job of it. But it is opportunity for us to look at the architecture and talk about the game. Because Remedy make really, really good games. I don't think they ever get the accolades that they deserve from a lot of people because they're such specific types of games. And I was watching everybody's favourite professional gamer and creator of Let's Plays, which is, of course, Darkside Phil. And he was saying how he likes Remedy's stories, he likes their atmosphere, he likes their world building, but he hates their gameplay. Hates the combat. The combat is garbage, in his opinion. And... ooh, I dashed through that one. I'm a beast. Whereas I understand why you could have issue with the combat, I feel like it's more of a personal thing than anything else. Because one of the areas where Phil critiques Remedy, in everything they've done pretty much, is that it's repetitive. And I always find this idea that something is repetitive to be more of a reflection of the person than the game. Because every video game is repetitive. The reasons video games work is because they're on a feedback loop. If there is no loop, the game doesn't work. You need to do something that elicits endorphins from your brain that makes your brain want to continue to do the thing that got the treat. It is no different than conditioning an animal that he's going to get a biscuit for doing something specific. Your brain works the same way. When you're playing a game, the best games are the ones where you do not realise you're in that feedback loop. You are part of the enjoyment of it, and you're doing it because you like it, and then the next thing you know, 7 hours have passed, and you forgot to do something very important, and now you're in trouble. That is quintessentially the flow state that every developer wants you to get into when you play their game. In this game, when I'm fighting, I am in the flow state because I like the flow of it. I like the moves, I like the aiming, you know, I like the idea of a third-person shooter, I like the mobility of being a faster character. It's not the best third-person shooter, and it's not the best Remedy game when it comes to its combat mechanics, but it's not bad, and this conceit of repetition and boredom, I always find to be more of a projection of something else. Especially with Darkside Phil, he's not the best example for this, because I don't know if you know this, but he's actually one of the best gamers in the country. However, he seems to have difficulty with almost every game he plays. And when Phil is doing poorly, his opinion of the game seems to go downwards. And I think a lot of us are guilty of this. When we start having a bad time, it can be easy to get emotional and to attack the game when perhaps it's our fault or it's something else. This is just, once again, human nature. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the game is repetitive, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the game is boring. It just means that you have reached your limit of the ability to stomach it. There are a lot of games that people love that I find repetitive and boring. Does that mean that they are repetitive and boring? No. It just means that I don't have the same level of tolerance that you do to play them. And conversely, I have a rather high level of tolerance to play Remedy games because I love them. And Phil thought that Quantum Break had a really good story and the gameplay was shit. I thought the gameplay in Quantum Break was fine. It wasn't great, but it was perfectly fine for what it was trying to be. It just suffered from a complete and utter lack of challenge, which made it almost brain dead the whole time you were playing. DSP thought Alan Wake was good for the first half, but it didn't have enough to it to be a full game, and thus it was boring because of it. I can agree a little bit with Alan Wake, seeming like it didn't have that much mechanical complexity, but what it did had felt really satisfying. I think that Alan Wake's freezing with the torch to break the shield and then shooting to kill is one of the most satisfying shooting mechanics ever, because it feels empowering, it feels strong, and it looks amazing for its time. Does it get repetitive if you don't like it? Almost definitely. But what you need to bear in mind here, guys, with this particular tangent is Phil thought Max Payne 3's shooting was shit. And if you know anything about third-person shooters, you will understand if you've played Max Payne 3 that Rockstar crafted one of the better shooting suites with that game. The shooting in Max Payne 3, except for a couple of animation priority problems, is probably one of the greatest shooting engines ever made. There are few games that match the accuracy and the precision that Max Payne 3 affords you. The shooting in that game is superb. However, Phil treated it like the shooting in this game, when the shooting in this game is nowhere near as good as the shooting in Max Payne 3. Not even close. In Max Payne 3, when you put your dot on a person, that's where the bullet goes. In this game, when you put your 90-foot reticle on a person, that is not where the bullet goes. It is a vastly different system. But Phil would merit them the same when they're not. And it comes back to the issue that I mentioned. This is actually quite an involved fight, this one, guys. It's not difficult, but there's a lot of enemies, there's a lot of diverse enemies, and it's a really cool room, so I like this fight a lot. Kill the orb first, though. The orb is a problem. But it comes back to the idea that... Do you know the reason why I think Phil thought Max Payne 3 was rubbish, repetitive, and just terrible? Because Max Payne 3 on normal is still quite a challenging game. And Phil got his ass kicked. So we have to understand that there's a level of personality bias when we look at a game's playability and its gameplay loop, that we're all going to see something slightly different, and our opinions are all going to be skewed depending on how we played. When you play a game and you get your ass kicked, like, here's a good example of a bias of my own, guys. I played Resident Evil... what the fuck is the name of that game? Revelations. I played Resident Evil Revelations for the first time, New Game Nightmare. I think it's called Nightmare, whatever the hardest difficulty is. Everyone in here right now who knows what that game is like knows that I made a mistake. Because that game is not balanced around a New Game Nightmare. Most games aren't balanced around New Game harder difficulties. You generally have a really fucking miserable time. And I didn't even finish the first room before I uninstalled that game and swore to never play it again. And I never will. Because I don't like it. I don't like anything about it. I could write a dissertation on everything I didn't like, and I only played it for about 10 minutes. But fundamentally, I have a negative personality bias towards that game because the way I played the gameplay was not the way it's meant to be played, and it reflected on my experience, and it reflects on my opinions of the game. Does that mean that the gameplay in Resident Evil Revelations is bad? Not necessarily. It just means my experience with it was. And it's the same thing with this game and with Max Payne 3 and with Darkside Phil in general. If you're having a bad time with something, it's always going to seem worse in that moment than it will do afterwards once you've calmed down. I know that Resident Evil Revelations has probably got some really cool systems that people like, because I know a lot of people that like it. I just know I don't. And even if I got to those good moments, there are so many other design problems with that game that stop me from enjoying it on a fundamental level that I'm not even interested in trying it, you know? It's the same thing with Resident Evil 7. A lot of people want to see me play Resident Evil 7, which is a game I despise. And I despise it because there's nothing in that game that interests me. It has nothing. There's not a single point when I played that game, for the little time that I did, where I felt, this is really cool, I like this, I can't wait to do this again. That entire game reminds me of the slow moments in a game that you can't wait to get past to get to the fast moments. Like a good example, guys, would be Gears of War. You know how in Gears of War there's a fight, and then there's a section where you walk with your hand on your neck and it's boring as fuck and you hate them? Resident Evil 7 is a manifestation of the walking sections with the hand on the ear that Marcus does in Gears of War that no one likes. That's how I feel about it, you know? But some people love the design in that game. Some people love those mechanics. Everybody's different. But here is the area where we learn a little bit more about the game. This is the area where Dylan thought it was going to give us this grand epiphany, and I really don't think that Jessie reacts to it the way that you would expect her to when it turns out that, you know, not everything is as it seems. Then again, the director himself, the director seems to be this large character, but he's only really used as a nice visual effect and a couple of lines of dialogue. I'm hoping when I read more about him, I'm going to understand him more, because I kind of felt like the director was going to play a much bigger role, and he kind of didn't. This is another segment that's got a really, really nice use of its aesthetic. this government, grayscale, battleship dark, you know, underground building. All the concrete and the gradient on the concrete juxtaposed with that shocking red that they use so prominently in this game. It is really unique, really interesting. It's nice to see some colour. Oh, watch this elevator, by the way. They've put a bomber guy in it. So I'm just going to throw a bin at him, because bin versus bomber guy, bin wins. But there you go. But I mentioned the season pass, didn't I? And then I didn't mention anything after it, because the problem when you speak to yourself for 3 hours is you end up forgetting what you have and haven't said. But the season pass is going to be interesting. Bit of an encounter in here. A couple of level 4 guys. Explosions, suiciders. Nothing too crazy. Should be fine. Gun's actually working. Rare footage of the gun actually working. It's a good day. But the season pass is interesting because it's a twofer, isn't it? I don't know if it costs money. I don't know if it's one of those free season passes. I don't know if it's like a live service that these games keep trying to aspire to be. Watch this. I thought this was a rocket guy. He has a shotgun. That was a mistake. But did you notice how I completely stopped and waited for the rocket? That's a little visual representation of what I was trying to do before. There was an idea of the shotgun shell not doing its job. Love to see that. Just use launch, guys. The gun is so intermittent and I don't really get it. It's random spread. It's so random it goes nowhere near where you point. But cleanse the control point and then continue on forwards. In this room, there are a couple of these spores on the wall that the game wants you to shoot. And I don't do it immediately because I get into flying around and trying to shoot these guys. There's a part of me that wishes that you did not have limited fly time, because I would have loved to have done like a ballet in the sky and took these guys on. But the only way to get more flight is to upgrade it, and I don't think it's worth upgrading personally in this run, because there's no circumstance where I need more of it. And obviously be careful on the ground. There's one of those creatures that's essentially forcing you to fly to get on the bridge and everything, which is a nice piece of design. I like this area because it puts two enemies together that work towards a shared goal. And it's great enemy design. It's not the most challenging or the most devious, so you're probably not going to die here, but it's a very ergonomic design, a synergistic design. An enemy that is indomitable and just clears the ground, and an enemy in the sky that anti-airs you if you join it. The ground guy forces you into the sky guy capitalizes on your ability to move. It's good game design. But those pods in front of me just on the wall there that were highlighted for a second, those are the things I have to shoot. You don't have to do them immediately, you can shoot them from the balcony, it's up to you. But the machine will not work unless you do shoot them. And you can either press the button, set it off moving, then shoot them, or shoot them and then press the button. It's up to you.
It won't rotate. Something's blocking.
But the DLC, as I keep getting interrupted by myself, which is very strange. I wonder what it's going to be like. Do you think it's going to be more narrative stuff? Do you think it's going to be flaws in the building that open up? Do you think it's going to be stuff they've taken from the game to give to us later? Because I hope it's not. Like, I want the DLC to be free, and I want it to be good. I want it to bring back the faith in DLC. Because as it stands, there was a couple of good ones on the 360, but DLC these days is just an excuse to complain that games back in the old days were better. And as much as I am nostalgia-driven, and as much as I am very critical of video games, I take no pleasure in shitting on new games. I would like nothing better than a new game to come out and just be nothing but a love affair of good design, and I had nothing bad to say about it, so I even struggled to talk about it. Because, you know, the game is so amazing, everyone can tell it's amazing, and you don't need my help explaining to you as to why it is. But that's just not going to happen. And unfortunately, there's so many like aggressive strategies that are put into video games nowadays, it's easier to bitch than it is anything else. And it is unfortunate, because fundamentally, as gamers, we don't sit here and want to complain. We want to have fun. We pay money for these products. We want to have a good time. The problem is, they're not always a good time. And this guy is the invisible dude. So as you push forward, he's going to try and get you with a cheeky jump scare, but if you look at the world, you can generally see his effect, because he has like a weird effect. Oh, and then he spawns, so that's a dead easy one. And that is a brick wall to stop you going backwards. He's there. See him in front of me? He's kind of just like squirreling. There he is. But you'll notice this guy takes not the most damage from launch. I wonder if the gun's better here. And I don't know whether it's the second or the third time he pops up when he fires his jizz at you. So the third time's coming up now. This might be the one where he attacks. But we'll have to see. And all I do is I wait for him to turn up and then I throw at him. So just keep looking out for the effect. There he is. That was sneaky as all hell. That was really good. See, I like that enemy a lot. He doesn't turn up enough, and there is never a situation where he is legitimately a big threat, but it's just interesting because it's different. It's a change of pace. It's one of the things that Gears of War 5 is doing really badly in my opinion. Like, Gears of War 5's first act is bombastic, it's just ferocious, the whole thing is boom, 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 your Gears of War, son, this is how we roll, really exciting. And then Act 2 could not be slower. I just don't get it. They got all that momentum, they built all it up, and then they just went, what if we went gardening for 9 hours? What if we talked about beige wallpaper? And it really lost me. It lost me for the longest time, and it didn't get me back until Act 3, like final chapter, which is not cool. When your game's best parts are the bookends, you've missed the point. And there's going to be somebody out there that really likes those middle sections because they're a slow burn, they're full of not fighting, they're full of exploration, they're full of storytelling that's really not that great. Like, it's unfortunate. It's the type of stuff that is, it's not that it's done badly, it's just that the way it's paced, it drags, and it's just... I talk about hooks, right? That guy just then was a unique. That's why he took so much damage. But I mentioned in this game that the central hook of this game is not really there, because it's answers we already have, and it's the details that we want to fill in. We're essentially playing to fill in the description beneath the video's title, and the video's title and thumbnail have given away the story. Which is what YouTube's doing right now if you care about Gears of War 5, so please avoid. And the problem with that is if you don't care about the small things, the big picture is already seen and uninteresting, and it can lose a lot of people that are looking for the overarching narrative. Gears of War's problem is that tenfold. The story in Gears is really interesting, but they do not lean on the interesting story. They lean on the uninteresting story, and the thing you actually want is barely touched upon. So you spend the whole time hoping they'll get back on track, and so far they haven't. And it's weird. I wonder why that happens. And I suppose the easiest answer to this would be that they're saving it for sequel bait, because I feel like Gears of War 5 is part 1 in Gears of War 1, 2 and 3. I feel like they're setting up their own trilogy. And it's weird, because Gears of War 4 was flawed, but the Gears formula was adhered to in certain ways in that game far better than it was in 5. And I don't think that's how that should be. A couple of guys... That was interesting. I think I hit the box then. If you don't know, the Pierce fires 2 rounds. So I feel like the first round should have been blocked, but the second round should have hit him. Maybe if I slowed it down I missed, potentially. But back on that DLC, do you know what I would really like? If anybody played Alan Wake... They had 2 pieces of DLC that actually carried the story on after the end of the game. And when that came out, I didn't know how to feel about it, because I felt like they'd shorthanded the ending intentionally to sell it to you later. Which they kind of did. And I always felt that that was a little shitty of them. But the content was good, and it was one of the very first things I ever uploaded on YouTube, believe it or not. If they do that with Control, I think I would like it. And if it was free, I think it would be a wonderful thing too. Because as much as I want Remedy to make money, and I do... By the way, guys, the moment you trigger this spawn, if you run and fly all the way back over to the entrance where you came from, you have a lovely position where you are slightly elevated, and they can't get to you that easily, and they have to run around, and by the time they've done that, you can pick them off with launch, and there's nothing they can do. This is a really interesting fight, because I love the idea of this kind of mock-up of the town on a grander scale here, and just fighting in it. It reminds me a little bit of a level from Titanfall 2, and it also reminds me of Batman, is it Mask of the Phantasm? Where there's that sequence when, is it when Joker fucks him up? It completely bullies Batman in that weird place with all the buildings and the planes. I think it's that movie, because that's the one that rings to my mind. And that movie's awesome if you've never seen it. But here is a unique heavy, the elite guy. And all I'm going to do is wait for him to fire his grenades, because it's the most damage I can do to him. If I could shoot this gun a bit faster, which you can do with mods, but I don't have them, this guy would have been... I don't know why I'm waiting here, I could have just shot him. One thing you'll find is the moment you start charging your gun, they start shooting at you. I don't know if it's some kind of input read or a AI prompt. A lot of AI these days reacts to you rather than acts on itself. And it leads to, the more aggressive you are, the more dangerous the AI is. If you've ever watched Ninja Gaiden, if you've ever played a fighting game on hard difficulty, all they do is react to what you press and then beat your buttons. It can be really obnoxious, but it's just the way they're designed. Merciless, ruthless, and very efficient. And then here we have the junk, and there's another big fight coming up here. This is another really difficult fight in theory, but if you fly up onto this balcony, it's really easy. So I found this spot at the very first time I played the game, because I'm the type of dude that when I see the opportunity to go higher, I'll always try to do it. And in this particular encounter, these enemies have to walk up a flight of stairs just to get to my level, and then they have to walk across 2 massive gangways to get to me, and if I've not killed them by the time they've done all that, I deserve to die. The only threat here is going to be the flyers. There are a couple of flyers that are going to spawn in a moment, but look at this, you are literally shooting fish in a barrel. And you can fly, which is crazy. And you can dash in midair when you're flying. The reason I never do it is because I like to save my energy to throw things. It's just one of those things. I got a little bit unfortunate here because this guy was hiding behind the junk pile. I don't know if that's good AI or if he's just stuck. But just throw some stuff at this dude. Keep hitting him, throw some stuff. You're at a distance here where you're not going to be able to see his life, so you're not going to be understanding how much damage you're doing, but you're still doing damage, so keep up. Keep up the pressure. A couple more suicide bombers and boom, flying guy. See him? And he's unique as well. You have to deal with him. If you don't deal with him, he can hit you. Fortunately, when you hit him with a pierce, he will dodge, and then you can throw a brick at him. And just then, he managed to dodge it, but usually he will not. If you're quick enough, it's guaranteed. And something else I think as well, but I'm not completely certain of, if you pull something behind the flying guy, and then you release it before it gets to you, it will attack him from behind, and I do not think he can dodge those either. The problem with that is, it's really hard to do that, because I don't feel like you're ever in control of launch as much as I would like to be. Like she'll pull shit off a wall from your side instead of stuff you're looking at. And you've seen that in the puzzle solving when I was trying to pick up the blocks, and for whatever reason she was grabbing chunks of rock and stuff. But look how interesting this fight is now the flyers have been introduced. This is where the dynamic shifts, and the advantage is not as in my favour as it was. That right there is that guy's melee attack. It's really cool. You can exploit it though by backing up and then hitting him with a shotgun when he lands. Ooh, look at that damage. Ooh, ooh, ooh. And there's a scream. But you see how powerful this balcony is? You're vulnerable to flying guys, but everybody else can't touch you. And then there's just this one guy. And I nearly die coming up because I jump off this roof and I forget. And I think I pressed levitate, but it didn't do it in time. And I end up taking fall damage. So if you watch, look at that. If I'd have died then, I would have been really angry. Because you can see Jesse's body change as I go to do the last minute levitate, but it's not enough. There's too much animation and I take damage. So that was a rookie mistake on my behalf. But pick up what you need, interact with everything that you can, and now we can make our way back and begin the face of the enemy. Oh, sorry, that was the face of the enemy. Now we're doing the finished tango. So when you get to the finished tango, guys, you know that you're in the last part of the game. You're going to be coming up on the Ashtray Labyrinth, which is my favourite part of the game for really obvious reasons, which I'm hoping YouTube doesn't flag me for. And then after that, there is the hardest room in the game, which I hate, and I'm looking forward to sharing my misery with you. And then after that, there is the final encounter of the game, which is actually pretty cool, as long as you don't get the weird audio glitch where everything looks diarrhea gold. But move back through the area, try to get back to a control point, and then from there you can walk back to where you need to be, and then we can move on to the next part of the game. But GameFAQs is an interesting read for this game if you've been over there. I love to check GameFAQs because it's generally like a conglomerate of mixed opinions. You've got the lifelong GameFAQs trolls, you've got the crazy elitists, you've got the nubs and the noobs, you've got just a mixture of every kind of type of player. You've got the troll, you've got the fanboy, you know, you've got it all. You've got the guy going on the smear campaign, and from what I've been reading with this game, there is some interesting mixed opinions on it, and I like games that get mixed opinions because it means that there's at least enough character there for people to enjoy and people to dislike. Oh, and something to note here, ladies and gentlemen. If you try to go to Artie before you go to the Ashtray Maze because you're one of those smart people trying to break the scripting, trying to sequence break and get the headset early, it will not work. He is just stood there not doing anything. You have to go to the maze to trigger his holiday, to trigger the endeavour that we have to go through to get to him to navigate the maze. And when I first played this game, it said get to Artie on the mission objective. I thought Artie was through the maze, so I struggled in the maze for about 20 minutes before I realised that I must be doing something wrong, and I ended up going elsewhere and realising I was doing it really, really, really wrong. But yeah, shout out to my fellow gamers who have struggled in that maze without realising that's not the way you're supposed to go at that moment. And if you're currently in the maze struggling, you have to go to Artie, and he's not in that maze. Artie gives you an item that lets you navigate the maze, and it's an interesting item because it leads to one of the more fun parts of the game, and if anybody's played Alan Wake, you'll appreciate it even more so. This is unique too, because I'm stood behind that bin, the guy wasn't shooting at me, so I was able to head glitch and shoot the shit out of him, which is another reason why you should never be afraid of the elites, because they're just so limited. I'd love to speak with Remedy and really get into the heads of their designers, because I feel like at this point, this is the second game they've made where the game has been a little bit too balanced in some ways. This game is harder than Quantum Break by a large margin, but you're still so goddamn capable, and I feel like the checkpoints don't help. I think if the checkpoints were better, they could have probably gone a lot harder on the balance. And I think the reason why the balance isn't as hard as it should be is because of the checkpoints. I feel like a lot of the problems this game has start and end at this bizarre homage to a different game, and I really wish they didn't exist because they don't suit it. Like, if I fall off this labyrinth, I have to run all the way through that room I've just come from. Like, all the way up those stairs, fighting all those dudes again that will respawn. Like, it does not suit the game. It really doesn't. But here is the Ashtray Maze. We're going to quickly hit this, and now we're going to find the janitor, who's one of the more interesting characters in the game, but a character that's getting complained about because it turns out a large majority of this planet are pretty bloody ignorant. So people are saying that it's very difficult to hear what Artie is saying, because if you don't realise, guys, he's not intentionally putting on a stupid voice to frustrate you. He's speaking English in a native Finnish accent, because he's a Finnish actor. And it turns out, when England... For England, James? No, for me, no. When English is not your first language, you are not going to have the same pronunciation as an English person or an Americanized English person would, you know? It's just not going to work. There are different languages with different sounds, and it's all kind of different. But people are legitimately complaining about him when the game has a subtitle option if he's hurting your ears that much, and I never found him that difficult to translate. He says a lot of interesting, intentionally vague and weird things, but that's his character. So to see so many people so vocal about it, it's disappointing, because if you don't know this, guys, Remedy are a Finnish company. That's where they come from, that's their language, that's their culture. And we've got a lot of ignorant people being like, why doesn't he speak properly? And it's like, well, you do realise that you can go anywhere on this planet and people are going to talk different. You can't expect everybody to speak the same. We can't all be French. This room, however, there's going to be another one of the elites that spawns after you get rid of these fellas. This is a slightly more difficult encounter than the last one, because you do not have a position of power to the same degree. But, did I already kill him? Or maybe I did, who knows. I was too busy talking about the French. But this is another area where you want to be careful with the levitate, because it's so easy to fall. And it's so easy to try and do it right and inadvertently do it wrong. But I would love to speak to the person who designs the encounters, the person who balances the game and looks into that kind of, you know, the combat design. Because there are a few things that I feel like the game needed. The game needs a hard counter to launch. Oh, and this room coming up, there's a ton of those parasite small guys who shoot shit at you. And if you fly across this gap where I am right now, you will completely circumvent this fight. Usually I wouldn't skip fights on a walkthrough, but that room, there is a mob of those mossy dudes, and there's a bunch of them shooting you. Anyhow, back to the Ocean View Motel, back to the navigational puzzle solving that we're going to be doing, and then we'll be able to find the janitor. As I was saying though, before I had to mention that room, I feel like the game needed an enemy that counters launch. And I feel like they could have done it. It would be a case of when you're holding an item getting ready to throw it, or when you're drawing an item towards yourself, there should have been one of the hiss that can grab it and put you in like a tug of war. And I don't really know what they would have done to make that like a battle, because tapping buttons is really contrived and nobody wants to really do it. Quick-time events can be good if they're skillful, but there could have been an interesting little interaction there where they can sabotage this ability that is so very strong. And they could have made it so that only certain enemies can do it. And they could have made it that if you counter their counter when they're trying to stop you from doing it, it makes it a critical, so it does even more damage because it's a reward for, you know, countering it in a good manner. Gears of War 4 had an interesting counter system which I quite liked considering the genre. When you were in cover and people tried to grab you and pull you over, or people tried to kick over the cover to get you, there was a couple of seconds where a prompt was on the screen for you to press melee, where you would punch them and stop them from doing it. It was on the screen long enough to react to, but it was on the screen a small enough amount for it to be a skillful reaction that required good timing. And I always appreciated that, and perhaps something like that would have been quite interesting. Like, I suppose the temptation for a mechanic like this would be to make it like a fishing minigame. You know how in a fishing minigame, how you pull one side until the tension's too much and then you have to stop or it'll break, and then you pull the other side? Like, there could have been some kind of wrestling between you and the foe, and if you do it wrong, they get the object that you're holding and they get to throw it at you, and things like that. There could have been a few ways. They could have even made it so that you could shoot your gun while you're in that moment, and it rewards accuracy for punishing the enemy trying to grab you, and then you stun them from doing the tug of war, and then you throw it at them, and it's just destruction, just absolute devastation. Like, it feels like there needed to be something, because there's nothing they can do. I've been playing this game for 2 hours now, and all I've done is throw furniture at people, and it's been super effective. And I love it, don't get me wrong, but I can't help but feel like there needed to be more, you know? I think if I only had base energy bar, so I didn't upgrade the level of my energy to be able to throw it a ton, I still think this would have been equally as simple. This, however, went wrong. So at the very beginning, I get caught in midair by a rocket when I'm using an item for launch. It's one of the only downsides of using launch. There's no healing items, there's a lot of enemies here, and how this works is the enemies seemingly infinitely spawn until that platform turns up and you get on it. This is kind of a last stand. This is one of the bigger fights in the game. I really like this fight, but not when I take a rocket at the very beginning, because then I have to play it like a bit of a pussy. And if I can kill him, I can get his HP drops and it'll give me a bit of a chance. And now I can continue to move out of the room again. But that when I got hit by that rocket, guys, I'd pretty much thought it was over. I thought somebody was going to trade with me and I was going to have to restart. And I feel like I probably should have died, because there's such a grace period with when the enemies shoot you in this game. don't really understand it. But look at this room. Do you remember earlier on when I said that the enemy encounters are almost always anchored in your favour, so you always have the advantage? In this room right now, I have a good position, but I do not have the advantage. They have the advantage, and that's why this is so interesting. It's so interesting because I'm on the back foot, and this is what this game needed. It needed more situations where I am completely overwhelmed. The problem is, when you do that, you run the risk of flipping that level of balance the other way. And this fight stands out because it's not fair. But it's not fair in a good way. And this comes back to this conversation that I have in all my walkthroughs of what makes a fair fight. And sometimes the fight has to be unfair for it to be the right amount of challenge. Of course, this can be skewed like many things can. A great example of this is Itagaki. Tomonobu Itagaki, the man behind the Ninja Gaiden 1 and 2 from the 2000s, the second iteration of Ninja Gaiden, he believed that things didn't necessarily need to be balanced as long as they were beautiful. And his games are fucking evil. His games are so evil, you don't understand how evil they are unless you've suffered them. But because of how evil they were, Ninja Gaiden is always hard. It's hard on normal, it's hard on easy, it's hard on Master Ninja, it's hard when you have 1,000 hours in it. It is never not hard. The experience gets easier as you get better at it, but even the best players still will suffer at the hands of a game that is brutally, mercilessly punishing the whole time. But that's too far the other way, you see, and I don't agree with that. It's a balance, guys, and there's no wrong answers, there's no right answers, there's just different iterations, and we're not quite there yet, but we're constantly striving, and it's always a fascinating dialogue. But this is the best part of the game. So we're moving through this maze of this crazy wallpaper and all these doors, and every so often we're going to get into a little scuffle, a couple of fights. Most of the fights, this is a tricky one if the pillars cock block your launch. Most of the fights are pretty fun. One of them is kind of challenging because of the positioning. You'll notice that I was quite passive then up on the staircase. If you run into this room, you can have a bad time. And this is a long sequence with a dynamic checkpoint for once. Fortunately for this recording, I didn't die in the maze. On my first playthrough, I died in the maze, and that's how I learned that it did have a checkpoint. It was quite cool, actually. But you'll also notice that the Old Gods of Asgard are playing, which is the band from Alan Wake. And the music right now just makes this moment. I love these moments when music starts playing and you're doing something cool in a Remedy game. Because if this does not get your adrenaline going, if this does not get, the shivers on your back coming up and on your shoulders, nothing will. Music has such a great way of heightening and enriching experiences. And it was awesome on the stage in Alan Wake, and it's awesome right now. And I really like this sequence, and I even use the option in the menu to turn off copyrighted music because this game is quite streamer friendly. And it still kept this song on, because I thought I was going to have to do this in silence, and it turns out that I'm hoping this doesn't affect copyright on YouTube, because if it does, this whole walkthrough will get fucked and it'll be really sad. But the only problem here is that I have to talk over this. I would love to let you guys just listen to it, because it's amazing. It's just cool combat, cool environment, with really, really cool song playing. And there's a bit of subverted expectations here, where every so often they throw weird stuff at you. But this is the tough fight coming up. It's not this particular one, this one's quite simple. And then the one after this is quite simple, but it's the one in the room. And I found out that the more aggressive you are, the more difficult it can be. You want to kind of get rid of the orb and then fire back the grenades from the elite, and then everybody else will just kind of fall in line. But be careful here, because the enemies are really cheeky, so it's easy to lose sight of them. Especially in this next room. This next room has a fixed spawn, and there's always one dude that you can't find. He's just kind of chilling out. You can clip on this doorway if you want to and shoot through the cover because, third person cover trick. But you don't need to, because you're a crazy director that flies around with a super powerful gun and ridiculous Bioshock telekinesis. But see how there's a dude that's behind here? One sneaky guy there. This is not where I want to be, by the way, at all. But it happens. Is that guy still behind me, by the way? Did I just ignore him? Oh no, I must have killed him. I was going to say, that was weird. I thought I'd ignored him then. That's dangerous. But do you see? I can't see anybody. It's almost like it's clear. It's not. There's one dude here being a ninja. And he's on the left, I think. Behind me. Like, look at this. Where the fuck is this guy? Luckily, music's great. So you're just like, okay, ports of the fall, we've got this shit. And I'm just like, I know there's one more guy. There he is. I knew there was one more guy because I remember one guy being all confused. And there he is. And then this is the difficult room. So I'm going to stay up here to try and get rid of the orb if I can. I'm going to clean up the lackeys and then hit the orb again. And there's going to be a big guy that spawns and a couple of rocket fellas. You want to save your launch for the rockets and the grenades, because if you get caught with your pants down and they hit you, they do so much damage. So I'm just going to sit in this back corner over here, in this wide area, and I'm going to wait on him. I'm going to try my best to get rid of the healer if I can, but he's been a bit of a bitch. So throw the furniture, get rid of them, and then now I should be able to get rid of the orb. There we go, the orb is dead and it's just a heavy. So there's his first grenade. Didn't catch it though because I'm picking up everything else. And I'm just going to wait on him, do a bit of damage, see what he does. And now I'm waiting on his gifts. There it is, that's the first one. Send it back. Be careful with that though, when they swing towards you, they can detonate. And it looked really easy, didn't it? This room can get out of hand really quickly. Especially if you're playing with base HP, because that's the only real danger. If you've upgraded your HP, you can fly around this room and have fun, you'll be fine. But this is the problem that this heavy has. When he gets close to you, he can't do anything, because you can just fuck off. And that right there was a repercussion of a grenade being close to me when I was telekinesis in it. But that's the last difficult fight of this area, because the ones against the flyers coming up, I don't know if the flyers can't evade when they're spawning in, but I'm going to spawn kill almost all of them. So he's bait, don't shoot him, waste of time. And then the next room we come into, there's going to be a dozen enemies, which looks like a terrifying fight, and then it doesn't happen. Because there's a lot of subverting expectations here, which is quite nice. Like, look at this. That's a lot of people. But then it doesn't kick off. There's a part of me that wishes it did. I'd love to fight a room with like 8 guys like that. That would probably be really interesting, because I can't fly, and there's only so much shit I can throw. But in here, this is an area where, in principle, the game can be difficult. But if you do this, as they're coming out of these doors, they die instantly. So, and what happens, guys, is every time you land on a new platform, 2 more guys come out of 2 more doors. And if you know the doors, you can hit them immediately, and it's easy life. Fortunately, I wasn't very good on that spawn, but they weren't the guys that dodge, so it didn't matter. But land on the platform, check the doors, there they are, and immediately spawn bang them. And look at that, like they don't even get a chance to do anything. It's too balanced, dude. If you know what you're doing, you can wreck this game. And I love that usually in games, but it shouldn't come after 2 playthroughs. After 1 playthrough, pretty much. That's the type of stuff that comes once you're really, really comfortable and you know everything. And that's the end of the music, unfortunately, just as the solo kicks in again. Such a cool section. Yeah, by far my favourite part. And now we can move on to Polaris, which is my worst section of the game for me. My least favourite objective. And this area coming up is the first checkpoint of it. It also has my favourite motif though, so I have to say this. But this checkpoint here, I hope you never ever have to come back from this checkpoint. Because this is when I realised that the checkpoints in this game were dog shit. When I fell off during the encounter coming up several times, and I had to run all the way back from here. To say that I was pissed off is an understatement. I can't even begin to tell you guys how bad the checkpoints in this game are when they want to be. But this thing coming up here is my favourite piece of visual trickery. The 4 pillars in that sandy plain kind of projected onto this environment. I love that effect. I think that's just the most interesting thing to look at. It sparks the creativity in my brain so much, it makes me want to write something based on it. Like, that shit's so cool to me.
Just
But this
sometimes-
platforming, I've done it so much, I could probably do it with my fucking eyes shut. I can't even begin to tell you guys how much I hate it. I hate this run back so much. But let's talk about it, shall we? Why is this so different to everything else? The reason the Hedron room is so much harder than every other fight is because you are put into a position of complete disadvantage. You are put against way, way more enemies than the game has ever put you against in a single fight. You have no cover unless you're aggressive, and if you are aggressive, you will die quicker. The reason why aggressive play doesn't work is because there's too many opportunities to fall off. It's too hard to see the geometry to know when you're safe. The amount of times I've dodged an attack and gone off the land and fell and died, or I've flown and killed a bunch of dudes and as I was landing I missed the area and plummeted to my death is really high. So the fight fundamentally is stacked against you, just at the base level. And the tools that you use to keep at advantage is your flight and your dodge, which you really cannot do outside of being incredibly familiar with the game and knowing it really well, because if you do one miscalculation, you die. And when you die, you have to do the full thing again. And this is 5 fights in a row, and only one of them is checkpointed, which just boggles my mind. There are several chain fights in the area, there's no cover, it's just bad. And this is it, guys. So this first one has a checkpoint, so don't worry. All you have to do here is kill the enemies, turn the laser off, more enemies spawn, turn the laser off, more enemies spawn, turn the laser off. And then the platform will rise, and then the ship part begins. This first sequence is fun, and it's got narrative implications. It comes at a point in the plot where you're like, wow, we finally found this thing, this is interesting, what's going on, what are they doing? There is a lot to like in this room. Stylistically the room is interesting, but it falls under all the pitfalls that I've mentioned as we've been talking about in this run. The final encounter needs to be adjusted, and I think the easiest thing they could have done is they should have flipped it. The encounter before the final one should be the one on the final platform, and the one on the final platform should be on the one on the one before. If they did that, there would be nothing wrong with this room, and I'd like it a lot. I still think falling off is garbage and shouldn't exist. I still think that the levitate should be better to stop that from happening, but that's just a product of, that's what they wanted it to do, and that's what it does. If this checkpoint was in the fucking room, I probably wouldn't have any problems with this. Except for it still is heavily stacked against you, and it penalises you for being evasive because it's so easy to fall. And visually the game is so busy and stylistic that it can be really difficult to judge distances and judge where you are. And it all culminates in, if you're going to die, it's going to be in this room. And it's not going to be here, because this is all fair, this is all well designed, this is all quite fun. But keep on wrecking these dudes as they come towards you. Bearing in mind, you see that gap at the side of the handrail that you can see to my left and right everywhere? If I land over that guardrail, I am dead. And I have to go all the way back to that checkpoint I mentioned, that control point. And I have to go all the way back on those balconies, jump across all those things, go through all those rooms to come here again. Just remember that. And I know there's somebody going to be like, well, that's not a lot. I play fucking Persona 5 in a speedrun and it takes me 60 hours. That's fantastic, but I don't. And to me, this is an inconvenience that shouldn't exist. But here is the final of the dishes to turn off, and this is your checkpoint. Then after this, there's no checkpoint until you do this, and this is when this gets difficult. The first 2 fights are effortless. I nearly did this on 1 attempt. Can you believe that? I nearly did this on 1 attempt, and then the final enemy on the ship part of the level pushed me off. He shot me, it knocked me back, it pushed me off. Can you believe that? I was tempted to post that video alone just to give you an idea of the checkpoint, because that's a 30-minute video and I have to do all 30 minutes again. And 30 minutes to me is unacceptable. I appreciate that it's not the end of the world and some people don't mind. I fucking do. But if you jump over to this right-hand side over here, you can get a decent piece of cover and you can proceed to start hurting the enemy that heals everybody. Once you kill him, the rest of this encounter is going to be pretty standard. There's going to be a couple of flyers, a couple of rocket guys. There's going to be, I think, one of those guys who pick up all the rocks. There's going to be just the standard ensemble. And here's a second spawn happening now, so just be careful of that. Be careful of the edges, that's the big problem here. The edges will get you killed. Like right now, just then, if I'd have continued going that way, I was dead. Luckily I adjusted, I noticed, I saw it, and I'm going to back up now because it's getting a little bit too hairy. But just then, if I'd have fucked that up and fell, dead. Falling is the final boss of this game, and it's been with you the whole game. It's like a whole game final boss. But use this position of advantage to counter the flyers. I'm using this laser system next to me, this satellite, for cover, so they can't throw any dog shit at me. And I'm just going to pick them off. Easy peasy, nothing here is even remotely challenging, you should be fine. The only threat is falling off. Falling off and getting tilted, those are the two threats in this room. There goes that guy, and there goes that guy. So now I'm going to fly back up and see what we're looking at. If you fuck up that jump just then and you fall, you're screwed, there's nothing you can do. So right now, you can get a second spawn here if you weren't aggressive enough, because there's a bunch of weird dynamic spawns that the game does. But if you hit this position, it's going to trigger this little vignette, and then it's going to raise the other piece of cover, which is the second encounter on this little endeavour that we're now doing. This next sequence is really fair. It's a big spawn of a decent amount of enemies, but you have the power position. You have a really strong position, you are almost never in danger, and if you use it correctly, you'll be fine. I really like this next fight, because it's fair. So I jump on top of this block over here, and then from here I jump across. When you jump across, you're going to trigger a spawn. The spawn has a couple of standard guys, it has an elite, and there's those guys in the chair that are knocking around. So I'm going to use this piece of cover to just go back and forth, throw as much stuff as I can at these fellas, and just dwindle their numbers. Keep on chipping away at them, clean them up, keep checking the left-hand side just in case somebody starts to flank. If done correctly, you will never get pushed here, because you're too dangerous and they're too cowardly. He will always stand back until the time when he doesn't, so just pay attention on the heavy. If he starts moving forward, clean up all the stragglers, and then focus on him. Throw his grenades back, he's nothing too serious. Just be careful though, above me right now, on this platform, there's a sniper. And he's really sneaky. On my first run, he nearly killed me. On my recording run, I knew he was there. And what you're going to see, guys, is after this fight is over, you're going to see me jump up, know exactly where he is, and shoot him mercilessly. You might wonder, how the hell did I know he was there? Well, I knew he was there when he shot me in the back on my first run. And it's one of those things that tends to stick with you, you know? But now it's just you and the heavy and the one sniper. You've done this fight. And I like this fight a lot because it's very predictable, it's very controllable, and it's one of those even encounters where you have a really strong position, there's a lot of them, but you can make it count against them because you can just throw shit and injure bunches of them at the same time. All of this so far has been fine. The only real threat is falling off. But this guy doesn't fire that often either. I don't know if it's because he gets hit by his own grenades and he thinks against it, but you'd think he'd fire a bit more, wouldn't you? Very passive. What the fuck's he doing? Kind of annoying, right? Considering he's one of the most dangerous enemies and he's just walking around. This is another area where I think the game could be adjusted. This guy should be more aggressive, and if he gets close, he should have a really good melee attack. Like, why doesn't he run at me? Why doesn't he have something else? He has no tools to fight me. But there goes Mr. Snipper. And then this is where the game turns into a pile of huge dog shit. So, once you turn on this machine, it's going to spawn the final of the encounters. The encounter coming up is a flat open space with no cover, and then a bunch of hills behind it, some plateaus that go up in height. You're going to get two of those rock guys that spawn, you're going to get a bunch of flyers, you're going to get a bunch of standard guys, a bunch of people that fire missiles, a bunch of people that explode. There are so many things that happen up here, guys, and it's awkward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to snipe the first few dudes from this position up here, and then I'm going to fly across. And what's going to happen is when I push this area, that entire raised platform above where we are now, that whole sequence is going to have enemies spawn. And there's going to be a lot of them, and your cover's not good enough. So I'm going to trigger the spawn, and I'm going to fly back across. Once I've flown back across, I'm going to snipe everybody, and it's going to take a decent amount of time because you don't do as much damage at distance. However, this is by far the safest way to do this. If you don't want to fall off, if you don't want to risk it and have to do this checkpoint again, this is what you do. I'm not going to lie to you folks, this is not the most interesting thing to watch, it's not the most interesting thing to do, but it's way safer than doing all of this and dashing off the edge. And I can't even say that the fight itself is unbalanced, because I've never been killed by the enemies, I've only killed myself. Well, that's a lie. I did get knocked off the edge by that one dude, but that was... You should have seen it, guys. He was behind a piece of geometry and he never moved. It was like he was glitched out. And then when I went to go and kill him, I shot him with a shotgun. It didn't make him flinch. He shot me and it knocked me off. So I don't even count that. That was the game being a cunt and screwing me for no reason. But here is the two big fellas. These guys take a while, and because the distance is so great, you can sometimes have to aim your throws a little bit because it does have a bit of a parabolic arc. So just bear that in mind. There's also a lot of spawns here, so even when it looks close and you go back across, more people turn up. And there's a lot of enemies. This is easily one of the most stacked locations in the game, and it makes me wish more locations were like it, but not in a location where I can fucking fall off. And it's just so frustrating. But if you have any stories of this room, guys, did you have an easy time? Did you have no problems? Was it just like everything else? Did it not stand out? Because you know that's what's it going to be like. This room's going to be nothing for everybody else, and for me it was just a big old nuisance. Because I just don't have the patience to replay such a boring sequence of events. You know, it's really sad too, because most of the game is flawless when it comes to the environments and the encounters being fun. From a fun perspective, when you're throwing launch at everybody and flying about, it is really fun. From a balance perspective, it's not so good, but, you know, not everybody plays a game to be challenged. Some people don't want to try when they play video games. There are a lot of people that play video games to relax. You know, I play video games to relax, my relaxation is gritting my jaw and wishing death on the devs, you know, because I've died the 9 millionth time doing the challenge run. But yeah, this is the only way I found to do this that was consistent and didn't involve you falling off. And thus this is the way I'm doing it. But once this guy's dead, I think I'm going to have to fly over again, and then it's going to trigger another spawn, and then I'm going to have to fly back and then deal with that. You can usually tell when the enemies stop coming because the game is kind enough to give you a symbol via audio. Sometimes it can play the audio and there might still be an enemy though. It's one of those things where I don't know if it always is as accurate. There was something on the internet about Jessie holding her gun in a different hand depending on whether or not enemies are near you, but there are times when that doesn't hold true, so I don't want to mention it in the walkthrough because I might confuse people if it turns out to be fake news, which there's a big chance it could be fake news because pretty much everything you read these days on the internet is fake news. And watch this, see this? This is why this take is so interesting. I have no idea why this guy spawned here, or him. This has never happened before. I've done this room 5 times. And I've never had enemies spawn near me. I nearly fell off them, by the way. This never happened except this attempt. So this was the attempt that I'm going to keep and going to show to you guys because it's the one that is the most important for information. You need to understand that when you're in this position sniping them, there's a chance that the game will confuse the spawns and put them over here. On my 2 playthroughs of this game, it only happened once. On my first playthrough, I did this room a dozen times, and I've never seen this. I've never seen enemies on this side of the room. It's cool because it's a dynamic spawn, but it's also dangerous because it means that you might do all this and die anyway. But just keep on picking them away. I think the reason why it did it is because I was stood on the ground. If you stood on top of these plinths, on these big pillars of stone, I think you should be okay. Because like these guys can't even shoot at you, you're so far away. They'll try, but they never hit you. And someone's going to hit me now to disprove my theory, but you know what I mean. It's very difficult for them to hit you. Like, I don't think I've ever had to get off of one of these because I've been getting hit too much. The guns aren't accurate enough. But just keep on sniping them, keep on picking them off. And enjoy the final encounter in the game because it's much better than this one. It has really interesting design too, which I'm looking forward to explaining. Because I didn't realise it worked that way on my first playthrough, but on my second playthrough it did because I tried to cheese it. And I'm surprised that this didn't work the same. If this worked as the final encounter did, then this section would be even more difficult, and I'm really glad that it doesn't. And I feel like Remedy must know that you can do this. I don't know if they want you to do this, but I feel like if you want an easy strat, this is the one. Just then was me fucking up the levitate, if you're wondering. That's how easy it is to do it. Because it doesn't control how I thought it would. It really doesn't. I'm very disappointed with it. Did you hear that noise just then? I think that's the game telling me that that might be the end of it. Always be trepidatious when you cross this chasm. Always be looking just in case to get into a better position. Because you never know. But I think we're safe to go and touch this laser now. And yeah, that's the hardest fight in the game in my opinion. And it's just because of the geometry. If there was an invisible wall stopping you falling off, I think that fight would be a lot more interesting. I suppose the real question is, just get good, scrub, right? Learn to fly, dog, is obviously the thing I was doing wrong. And then now that we've done that, you'll notice that those crazy triangle obelisk things have now elevated up so that we can climb up and go to Polaris. I'm double checking the map to make sure that it hasn't moved, but you can see that they're just to the side of you, and then from here you can use levitate to get to it, and it's going to trigger a cutscene. And then we're going to go to, I believe it's the fake credits, which is really weird, and then it leads us to my least favourite part of the game, which is kind of akin to the nightmare sequences from the original Max Payne. Only the difference here is we're not following a blood trail and there's no annoying screaming baby. But what happens here, guys, is you seemingly, I don't know for certain, I'm not a speedrunner, you seemingly have to do 2 menial tasks before the item hits that news bin that allows you to go to the director. So I like to pick up the cups and I like to do the photocopying, I think, are the 2 that I'm going to go for. Doing the mail on the table is the most tedious thing, so I'm just not going to do that. But if you do those 2, it will give you the mail, and then when this resets and you have to do it again, you want to just do the cups because it's the quickest one, and then when it resets for the 3rd time, you don't have to do anything, you just want to wait for the mail. But that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to scan, and I'm going to do the cups. Because this is the part of the game when it gets all existential, and reality starts eschewing itself into other places, and you're not quite sure what's going on. They've done the fake out with the credits, and you don't really have any closure, and you're wondering where the story's going to go. But this shit's so menial, I don't really get it, personally. I understand that it's trying to be mundane, it's trying to be, you know, it's juxtaposing the mundanity with the magic of what we've been doing. It's trying to show that you're kind of cast into a shadow of yourself, into this husk. But, I don't know.
I'll do my best.
She's obviously not in the right headspace, because this is not what's happening. Or is it? Is this the only moment of the game that's reality and everything else has been a dream? Is it one of those games? This is the only part of the game where she was alive. She died when the hiss breakout happened. But if you come over here, you can listen to Mr. McCaffrey talk, who is of course the voice of Max Payne, and then it will reset the day Groundhog Day style, and you can go and pick up the cups. It's certainly something. From a narrative perspective, you can hear a lot of interesting stuff here as you're kind of bullied for being the outsider, the new girl, as they all keep calling you. The incompetent new girl, it seems. But you can see Dylan looking like a serial killer behind the glass over there, just staring in. And then once you fill this bar, you can go and get your mail. So let's have a see. I think I turn away and then it populates it, yeah. I don't know if it populated it then because I turned away, or if it was just on a timer. But now that we've done this, we don't have to do any more of those tasks. When I was first here, I was getting really annoyed, because I don't like these parts in games, personally. I know why they do them, but I always feel like all you've done is created a sequence that people will hate when they come back here on their next playthrough. Because let's face it, narrative moments are only impactful once. After that, they're just tedious. And I don't know why there isn't just an option to skip this. Like, I don't know why there isn't an option to just go the right way the first time. One of the things I loved about Metal Gear Solid 5, you know, the tech demo they released, the first one, Ground Zeroes, is that once you knew the location of things, you didn't have to do the mission objectives to find the locations, because they were always there. So you could skip the tedious stuff and go and grab the important thing. And I always loved that. Because if you take the time to learn the mission, you shouldn't have to do the tedium to get to the fucking mission. And this game could have learnt from that, I think. And there might be way more going on here that means a lot more once you've read all the files, but I just don't see the narrative importance of this sequence. But I do know, from a gameplay perspective, this is the part that pisses off the dude that doesn't care about the story. Because I care about the story and it pisses me off. But back into the Ocean View Motel. Another purely narrative-based environment for some mild navigation and puzzle solving. Definitely leaning on its inspirations here and on the uncanny nature of the game. You'll notice it's a different door as well, which leads to that cutscene, and now we have to turn off the projector. In this segment, the game really messes with the focus and with the blur to give you an idea of which one you should be highlighting here, because if you land on the wrong block, you take damage. It's almost like you're landing on hot coals, and it burns you and you die. And I died a bunch of times when I was first doing this, but do you see how some of the platforms are highlighted more so with the colour, and they have the texture clarity on them, as opposed to some of the other ones where it's all doing the Gaussian blur, the weird effect, the smokiness. You just kind of want to hit the most prominent looking platforms and you'll get through this without too much of an issue. If you touch the wrong platform, you will insta-melt. It's kind of a nuisance. And then this is it, guys. This is the finale of Control. There's no final boss, there's just a final encounter, and it takes place in this place. And you'll see that the visuals right now, they are red, but there's that tint of orange to it that can be really offensive to the eye. Luckily, there isn't that visual bug which makes this look completely goldy orange happening right now, but it's certainly not my favourite perspective of this. And all we're going to do is spam launch because it's the best move in the game. And we're at the end of the game. And you'll notice all these enemies have level 30, they have shields and everything, but I'm killing them in one hit. I haven't changed anything, guys. I haven't changed my abilities. It's almost like the end of the game is a bit of an abilities to show you just how strong you are, regardless of how strong you actually are, because I feel like if they were really level 30, I'd need to hit them 4 or 5 times, and I'm really grateful that I don't, because this section would be tedious. But here's how this works. There is a big fight on the first platform, you then do some traversal and fight on a second platform, you then get to the third platform, which is the biggest fight and the end of the game, and then after that you go between 2 platforms to the pyramid, which ends the game. If you die in here at any moment, fall off the world, get killed by the enemies, you have to do every single fight in a row again. So this is 3 fights in a row, 2 of them being quite large, the final one being the largest and the most dangerous. Where this gets interesting is the final fight. If you do not land on the platform and commit to the fight, it will endlessly respawn enemies and never complete. I didn't know this, and I was trying to give you the cheesiest strategy and the safest strategy I could. On my first playthrough, I jumped onto the final platform and I committed to it because I noticed this firefight was way more fun than the last one. But for the walkthrough, to give somebody a safer option, I tried it and it didn't work. So what I'm going to do is a mixture of the two. I'm going to show you a place you can go if you have to, just to recoup your thoughts, just to get back on top of things and then go back into the fray. But what I would prefer you do, which is the thing that I did on my first run, which is there is a tall platform above a doorway, which, aside from enemies spawning on it and those sneaky explosive guys coming around the side, there's no way for the enemies to get to you unless you see them, and by the time they've got to you, you've already killed them. The only risk then is the dudes that throw the earth at you can hit you with their projectile, but there's enough cover that that shouldn't happen. It must be said though, I really wish this sequence was completely red. I think the completely red aesthetic that they used before, you know, that deep red that was really striking? I feel like it just looks so much better than this one. This one just, it looks almost dull and copperish. It's not my favourite. Because that's one of the things I'm not mentioning too. You might be watching this and thinking, Jesus Christ, this is hard to see. I don't know how you're keeping up on it, or, you know, because you've not played the game maybe, and you're right. It's always harder when you're fighting in a location like this because of the way that the visuals look. There's a lot happening on the screen, there's a lot of effects happening, and it makes something that's quite standard into something more so than it is. And from an artistic direction, it's probably very dramatic and very impactful and very thoughtful, and they really like it. But from a gameplay perspective, if there was an option in the menu to turn this shit off, I would. Because I don't give a fuck. I like to know what I'm doing. I'm a mechanical guy. Graphics are fantastic, but I like frame rate better. You know, I like visibility better. But this is it, guys. This is the big one. So I do a mixture here, which you just shouldn't really do. Fly all the way up and land on that top balcony, guys. It's the best thing you can do. You can jump to the right-hand side and then jump up, but fly to the bridge that's above me right now. Once you're up there, you are fine. You are literally king of the hill. You're going to have a good time. But at the beginning here, there's an invisible dude. And there's an invisible dude backed up with some people, so I'm going to back away, and I'm going to show you what you shouldn't do. You should jump towards that from the next platform. So, this got really scary right now. This could have been super bad. Fortunately for me, they're terrible shots. And that's how you get back to the platform. You jump from the elevated segment, and you're completely safe then. But you need to get rid of that strange Aladdin carpet of doom, because if you don't, he's going to hurt you more than anything will here. Because it's really sneaky. But I back up, I snipe a few people, we get an extra spawn of some enemies. Did you notice how that guy spawned on that top bit? He's one of the only threats when you're up there. And usually one guy's not enough to kill you. There's exploding guys on the right. You can see the blur effect, which means Aladdin's carpet's still knocking about. And then on the top there's a couple of exploding men too. None of this is a big issue. This fight as well, guys, is going to look way longer than it needs to be, because I'm going to show you evidence of the fight repeating itself and not finishing. Because what happens normally is when you go across there, you fight a bunch of the enemies that you see me killing, and then 2 of those rock shield guys turn up, and then when you kill those, there's a bunch more spawns of explodey guys and normal guys, and then when they're dead, you've done it. But if you do not commit there, the rock guys respawn, and there's the end of him anyhow. So I push forward to try and trigger the next spawn. The moment it happens, I'm going to back up and show you the defensive technique. Do not do this. But this is what I thought was going to be the best thing for people to do. So I land up here, I look across, and as you can see, there's a guy flying, and there's a couple of guys on the ground. 3 guys flying right now, really dangerous. But I have the position of advantage, so I'm going to absolutely destroy them. And that's why this position is so good, because they can't deal with it. They have no tools to deal with me, and I can just take advantage of that. So the flyers are dead, easy game. What happens next? Can't see that many more enemies, so I'm going to probably fly across, trigger the next spawn, and it becomes apparent after a while that the spawn's repeating. Did you see that? That was Aladdin's carpet again, and that was the dude on the right again. That is the beginning of the fight I've just been doing, repeating itself. But silly bastard Chris just thought this was a long fight, so he didn't cotton on that this was happening. I love this design. I really do. Because it guarantees you cannot be a dirty bastard to circumvent it, which is what it should do. I'm really glad the last room, the Hedron room, didn't do it, because that room is a nightmare. But in this fight, because you're not flying around as much and because the geometry is more defined, I didn't fall off here at all, so I just happened to enjoy this a lot more. So I didn't mind it. But it makes me happy that they noticed you could do this, and they made sure that people can't. Of course, that being said, I'm certain some clever, crazy person is going to find a mad, cheeky way of doing this where it doesn't do that. But from what I saw, it's easier and quicker to commit to standing on this platform. And does it get hectic? It does. And can it be quite dangerous? Definitely. I actually had an easier time on my first run than I did on this run. And I don't know if that's just because I stacked up the spawns the way I have. But I suppose another use for this would be maybe to farm some of the currency, because every time you kill these enemies you are getting points. But if you're playing on PC, why the fuck would you do that? Just get like a cheat engine and give yourself max money if you care about that stuff. You might as well save your life. But here we go. See if we can bait out Mr. Phantasm here. Come on. There he is. Damn, we traded again, but it did no damage. I don't know why. Did that kill him? And of course I'm going to run away because I'm trying to give you elite bitch strats. I do wish this room was a different shade of red though, it must be said. And I wonder if it's one of those things where your eye kind of gets used to it and it loses its luster, or if it's just a colour that's an interesting choice for so much of it, because it saturates the whole screen. Look at that, by the way. Random magician throws a grenade that has a 9-hour fuse. Do you see how long that took to blow up? That was crazy. But it's about this time, I'm hoping, when I start to realise, Chris, this ain't working. These dudes are just coming back. This is not even close to the end of this fight. What is going on? Come on, dude, realise. And I hope you don't mind that I left this in, folks, because I want to show you this stuff. I want to show you what I found. I could edit around this and make it look dead quick, but it doesn't help you. And if you get into this situation, I can help. So this is at the point where I just go, fuck this is just not working. And then I come over here, and if you watch, this is where you want to patrol. Because those guys have to go all the way around to get to you, so they're dead easy to kill. And on your left is the only place where they can spawn in a standard soldier. Down at the bottom, there's going to be 2 of those rock guys, and when they turn up, that's the end of the fight. Kill those 2 guys, kill the stragglers, and you've won. But they only turn up, it seems, when you're on the platform, and I love that. But just keep your head on a swivel, because there's a guy going to hit me from the left in a moment. But there they are, do you see them? And they're uniques as well. Look at all the enemies, see all the spawns? Look how many dudes there are. Up here, and oh my god, don't do this. Fuck! I thought we'd figured it out. We didn't figure it out. Yeah, we didn't figure it out. We went forward to trip it, to try and pull it further. And then it just turns out that even if you kill these 2 rock guys, they spawn again. So, yeah. Apologies in advance, guys. There's going to be a little bit more fighting here than you need to do. Because this doesn't work. It just doesn't work. But I always say that my guides are... I suffer so you don't have to. And if you get nothing from the videos, the one thing I would like you to get in spite of itself would be learning the lessons that I made the mistakes with. Making a perfect walkthrough can be really cool and really awesome, but it doesn't necessarily help as much as a walkthrough that has those human elements that people need to see. Some people watch walkthroughs and think you're the best player in the world and you never have trouble, and it's just not true. Sometimes I think YouTube can skew people's perspective of people's abilities. Oh, by the way, see that? That's the guy that they spawn up here that can sometimes be a problem. Luckily, he isn't a problem because I got rid of him and I got my life back. But just be careful. You know. And here we go. I think I'm going to commit to being up here now. I think I'm just going to grit my teeth and bear it. Look how much damage you do. That is so crazy, dude. You are so strong on this moment. And I don't know about you folks, but I was really hoping you'd fight the pyramid. I was hoping the pyramid was going to be a final boss. I was hoping it was going to be something super sick. More flyers coming in. Couple dodges. Cover up here is really good, so you don't have to worry too much. You've got so many things to put between you and the enemies. And they can't dodge the gun, it seems. They try, but it doesn't work. And then if you get too close to something and you can't get away with just dashes, fly. Flying is so powerful. But here we go. I think we're committing to it now, guys. I think we're going to end it now. There's another one. Take him out. But where I'm stood, if you stand here, I'm almost certain nothing can spawn on you. Nothing can get to you. They have to come this way. So you will never get flanked. They can't flank you. It doesn't work that way. And this is a really powerful position. And this is one of the reasons why this fight is so much more manageable. And that's the elegant dance, isn't it, of any encounter. Putting yourself in a place where you have the advantage and maintaining that advantage. The way the game deals with this is by sending the flyers at you and by sending the spawn on my left. That guy who spawns on my left is one of the biggest and easiest ways for them to put pressure on me and to put me in a position of disadvantage. But these guys really suffer in this moment because they can't path up to me. For some reason, they do not follow the same path as those explodey people, so they will literally sit underneath me and spam stuff that doesn't hit you. I think it hits me because I'm a terrible player, but there's almost no reason to get hit by these guys other than you can't see and you didn't see it was happening or you couldn't read the cues. But as long as you keep on them and keep hitting them, like we've nearly killed one of the guys. He's pretty stubborn though, isn't he, that one? Launch is definitely the way to go here. So much damage. But then again, the gun does so much damage as well when you do it like that. And if I'd have thrown launch at him, if I'd have realised he wasn't dead, I thought he was dead then, I don't know if you felt the same. And boom, you see that? I feel like that one sliver of health they give you is a grace period to stop you getting one shot. That reminds me of Bioshock. Have you noticed how in Bioshock, where when you get hit, it makes that gasping noise, but it doesn't kill you? Wow, that was lucky. What the fuck was that? I was real close to that explosion. Boom. And then it's making the noises. Is that it? That's it. There you go, guys. End of the game. Notice how the game ends when you actually stand on the platform and fight. So it got hairy there twice, but other than that, very simple. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is the end of Remedy's Control. The only thing left to do now is to jump up towards this pyramid and hope you don't fuck up the levitate and die, because if you do, you're going to have to do the full thing again. Good luck with that. The checkpoints are atrocious. The game is great in spite of them. The story is interesting, even though it's, you know, got a couple of shortcomings. And there's no final boss, which makes me kind of sad. But I hope you enjoyed the walkthrough, guys. I hope it helped. Stay tuned for Gears of War 5 Insane Solo. It will be coming sooner than you think. You take care now.